Day two of the Echelon Racing League virtual tour of the Gila, as today we head to the Mongollon Road Race, a legendary course in American cycling. After the Criterium yesterday, we move into 2 long days of road racing with the Mongollon Road Race today on Saturday, and then we move into the Gila Monster Race on Sunday. My name is Brad Soner, here with Echelon Racing League race director and Project Echelon team rider, Eric Hill. Eric, a much different day today, but let's talk about what we saw yesterday. A super fun day of criterium racing on the classic American crit course.
Yeah, both of the races were, extremely explosive, exactly like we thought it was going to be. The course dictated the race to a really high degree. 4-corner crit, you had to know how to race on the RGT platform. Plus that big, ascent towards the finish line and the descent on the backside of the course created some really interesting dynamics and launching points for multiple attacks that occurred in both of those races. So yeah, extremely fun to watch, both men and women.
Let's talk about what's next up today with a much longer day of climbing. Now, Eric, the courses are not the exact replica because we don't want to put the riders on the trainer for 4 or 5 hours like they would on a normal stage. So we're expecting somewhere around 2 hours for today's stage.
Yeah, I think actually probably closer to 90 minutes, an hour and 35 minutes for the men, and hour and 45 for our women. But that group dynamic, that pack dynamic, and then being able to push through, I think it'll be a little bit shorter than that. But it is going to be brutal, and people will be just hanging over their handlebars at the end of this Mongollon climb. It is absolutely brutal, and I'm excited to see what happens and watch people just blow up because that's what's on the docket for today.
Yeah, real question is, can the riders that did well yesterday do well here again today? Because the criterium racing obviously a lot different from the road racing, but I think it's less different than the real life racing, where a rider that does well in a criterium has a much better chance of doing well in a virtual road race maybe than a real life road race.
Yeah, we're still only talking about an hour and a half of effort relative to, like you said, 4 hours on the road. So hour and a half, yeah, I think a lot of our criterium specialists and people who have that punchy in and out ability, they should be able to hang today. The big question is going to be, do they have the 20-minute sustained power to maintain their position in the group on the big final climb?
All right, let's take a look at our series standings heading into the day today after our first weekend of racing. Now, Eric, the scoring is omnium-based, so they're racing on a GC time-based scenario for the weekend, but then whoever wins the GC, it moves to a points-based scoring for the overall omnium. So after our first weekend of racing, Ben Thomas with an 11-point lead over Charlie Velez for the Canyon Esports team, and then Matt Osborne sitting in 3rd place overall ahead of Charlie Ravel and Simon Dubuque. So kind of an interesting scoring methodology here, Eric, switching back and forth between the time-based riding for the weekend and then the points-based riding for the series. Is that a good way to describe it?
It is, yeah. Even for our Omnium weekends, like we had last weekend with the RGT stage race, riders were able to get points every single day, but they didn't have to race every single day. For the stage race, like the Tour of the Gila, they get points only based on their GC position at the end of 3 stages. This isn't too much different than what USA Cycling currently uses for their PRT ranking system. And so we kind of modeled it off of that.
Welcoming back in Garrett Peltonen, former professional racer and Silver City resident. Garrett, I know this is a road that you know well. Describe it for us, what the road looks like out there on the course, because I think this is one of the more unique courses that the riders will see all year. All right, we're going to have to work on getting Garrett's audio. And Eric, I know you've been there. You've raced these courses.
Yeah, no. Today again, it's a flat run in, but that doesn't mean it's an easy run in. So it's flat. They're going to have to read the group well. They're going to have to conserve as much as they possibly can. You do not want to burn a single match at all leading into that climb. You're going to need every single bit of energy that you can have for that last 20 to 30 minutes of this race.
Yeah, this is going to be a drastically different race today, racing for 2-ish hours versus an hour of racing yesterday. If you thought you were tired at the end of the crit on stage one, just wait until you see what you got waiting for you at the end of stage two. Eric, I think there's a good chance we see a lot more riders start to blow out early today as they have trouble timing this much longer stage. So we are underway and rolling as now we just wait to see who the first riders to go. You see Zach Nair being highlighted here, a very strong rider yesterday for the Project Echelon racing team. In fact, Nair finding his way to a podium in the crit yesterday. So see some riders already caught off the back. Eric, this is another unique part of racing. You got to get the start just right in a virtual race like this.
Yeah, we talked about it yesterday. And all virtual racing platforms, one of the unique things is that you can be putting out power while you're waiting in the race pen or at the start line. So those, as soon as the flag drops, people are already doing 5.5 to 6 watts per kilogram. They're getting that immediate jump off of the line. And if you're not ready for that, that gap is going to substantially open right away. And you're going to have a lot of work to do to get back. Hopefully today, with it being a really long run in to the major climb, folks that weren't ready for that are going to be able to make their way back to the group. But again, it's a match burned that they did not want to have to use before that final climb of the day.
Hey, Garrett, we were talking about how you train for this yesterday, whether or not it's similar or drastically different from the training that you do for road racing. I imagine the style of effort is very different, too. We talked about intervals yesterday in the crit, but I don't know how you really train for an all-out 2-hour solid 100% effort. All right, sounds like we're still trying to get Garrett in here. Well, watching the power meters already turning orange and red as you see Ben Thomas starting to go deep here already. It's less than a minute in, Eric. This is just the nature of virtual racing, one of the strange and unique parts of racing here, having to go full gas a minute into the race. I don't know if there's another sport like this.
You know what, Brett? I don't know about that. I mean, right? You look at some top-end road races. There might be some teams that are deciding to try and form a break today. Want to put pressure on teams really early and make them, make a decision. Do we want to try to send somebody up the road with in a small group, or do we want to keep all of our guys together? So teams are going to have to make some of those decisions early on here. If guys are attacking and trying to get in a breakaway, the speeds look really high, and that sounds like it's going to be rather difficult for them to do. But it could be a tactic that people are trying to play, and it's going to require people to put in some major efforts to stay in the group or to get in that break if that is in fact what's going on.
Yeah, probably a much better chance that we see a breakaway out there today than we would have on the Criterium days. Just the nature of the distance of the course, and probably going to see some more selections out there as well. I don't know if we're going to see 20 riders finish this race. Remember, this is a stage race rules this weekend. So if a rider doesn't finish within the time cut on one day, they cannot continue to race on the next day. So for some riders, it may be just about trying to hang with the group and hang in there so that they can finish the next day. That's never a fun place to be. But Garrett, sometimes it's best to just pull the plug if you have a bad day and then try and save your energy for the next day in a stage race.
Yeah, especially when you have, a finishing climb like there is today, where you just sort of soft pedal up the climb and then save your energy for another climbing stage tomorrow. And as I was trying to talk earlier, today's course it's sort of lumpy to start with. You have little ups and downs, but it doesn't really start getting good until the last, I think the climb's, a little under 11K, something like that, goes up about 2,000 feet. So it's a good solid climb at the finish, and save some energy. It might be good for some people, just soft climb up and save it for tomorrow.
Well, I'm already watching riders go into the red zone here. Again, it's about making sure you don't miss this initial selection, because the riders know that it's coming. When you see guys like Charlie Velez up at the front for Canyon Esports, this is one of the experienced riders in this field. Canyon Esports, one of the more dominant programs out there in virtual racing. So these guys know how to ride the platform. They have a lot of riders on the team that have raced on the RGT platform, so they're well aware of the physics and strategy required in this race and on this platform. A little different than the other virtual racing platforms. There are some certain physics that come into play here, but for the most part, it's about staying in position. You want to be near the front, but not at the front on RGT, because the wind does affect you. There's a draft element if you're the first rider there, but you don't want to be too far at the back either, because that opens up the opportunity to get gapped off. Here's Patrick Wall taking a look off the front for the EVOC bike team. Another strong squad racing here in the Echelon Racing League, and Wall going to try and have a go of this one by himself. Eric, a bold strategy, but he's probably hoping someone's going to join him here, and I think Canyon Esports might be sending one up right now.
Yeah, there's no way a single rider is thinking that they're going to send it off the front and make it, right? So that's exactly what they're hoping is, hey, can we draw some people out? Can we get a small group off the front? And then can this race settle in a little bit so that the rest of my team can have an easy ride to the base? I can control the race from the front, and we can be represented up there, and other teams have to do the work if they want to bring it back. So I highly doubt he went up the road thinking, yep, this is my day to ride solo for 44 more kilometers. He's hoping some folks will be joining him, and it looks like that is the case, and they have a small gap off the front here.
Yeah, this is Philip Dana making another move here for Canyon Esports. Another strong rider who had a podium finish earlier this month, or last month, I should say, in the Echelon Racing League. So these guys looking good with Wall and Griffin. Also, that's Payne Griffin of the Seasucker Gutenplan Coaching Support Clean Sports Squad, finding his way off the front.
Yeah, it's good to see that team make it into the break. We haven't called them out much. This is a new platform for them, but we're really, really happy to have that team here. And we can see these teams starting to learn the platform and learning how virtual racing works. And clearly, they're understanding the dynamics well enough to find themselves at the front. So good on the SCS team for getting in there and making an effort here early on.
Look at the other names behind this group of three. You see Zach Nair, Henry Blackburn starting to move up there, as well as I think there are some riders in this field that are liking what they see in this group. Now, if you're new to the platform, you can see the distance of the riders behind just to the right of their names. First, it's going to show their watts per kilogram, and then it'll show the distance behind the rider in front of them. So you see the first 8 riders there. It's a good way that's kind of how we measure the gap in virtual racing. It's a little better way to measure than time on these virtual courses. So the break led by Patrick Wall, eventually joined by 2 more riders. That one gets pulled back, but there will be a reset here, right? This is very similar to real life racing, Garrett. I know you've been there many times where the goal or the job is to get in the breakaway for the day, and then there's 40 breaks that you have to decide which one you're going to go with.
Yeah, and at the start here, as we sort of see, there's a couple of groups trying to get away, etc. And we'll see how it plays out today. I think maybe a small break will get away, and then some teams will work together to maybe bring it back just before the start of the climb, like the last 10K or so. And then they'll be all together, and the climbing teams will have a chance to give their riders, put them in good position to finish off the day on top of Mongollon climb.
Garrett, would you agree? I think for me, the first 40 minutes of a race is probably equally as stressful as the last 10K sometimes. It's hectic. Everybody's fresh. Everybody feels good. Everybody wants to be represented in the break because it makes their day a heck of a lot easier. Right now, people are definitely nervous. They don't want to be the ones to miss out. And tension is high. Tension is just as high as it would be at the finale of a race. And so this is one of my favorite times of a road race, and where I really like to see team dynamics play out. And this is where you can see the really good teams that communicate well find success.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. The start of the race, as you mentioned, is everyone's fresh. And especially on a day like today, we had the crit yesterday, so this is the first sort of climbing stage, and everyone wants to be towards the front. And especially, as you mentioned, teams, they all want to be represented in a group that goes out the front, so it can be a little easier for them. They don't have to do the work to pull that group back together. So I definitely agree. And each team, when they look at riders that are going up the front, are taking a basically analysis. Do we have to go and close that? And then eventually a group will hopefully get away, and then we'll maybe bring it back together for the climb at the end of the day.
Well, despite the efforts of these guys trying to get off the front, it looks like there might be more action at the back, because they're just holding a massive pace at the front of this group right now. So it may be just about riders getting shelled out of the back of the group here pretty soon, as we see Harden back up here. Zach Gregg is trying to chase down, but Harden finds himself with about 30 meters off the front. An interesting move here, but he's got to get help, Eric. Harden right now, you want to spend a little time off the front, but you need to see riders coming up pretty soon if you're planning on making this breakaway work.
Yeah, and Will Harden, I mean, has been riding extremely well in the virtual space for the last several months. He's a younger rider, came through the collegiate scene. I think he's out of North Carolina. And yeah, I think he's just really shown himself extremely well, and definitely a danger man, but good enough that I wouldn't want him up the road by himself right now, because I think he can survive this climb and put himself top 10 GC at the end of the day. So he's going to have to make a decision for himself too. How long does he want to be out there if people don't choose to join him? He's got to conserve and be smart about his efforts.
You see Tom Thrall up there as well. Yesterday's winner in the criterium for stage 1 of the virtual tour of the Gila. This guy was incredible. The Canadian, who is now living in the United States, actually spent a year racing in Singapore, but has now moved back to the United States here and is focusing on e-racing with the EVOC bike team. So this is going to be a guy to watch today. Put up really good numbers yesterday for Thrall, and the entire EVOC bike squad comes loaded. But with a win last night, Eric, there's a little bit more confidence on this team headed into the race today. Yeah,
I'm right. Like, racing is probably 80% physical and 20% mindset, and some people might even say more. So his mindset is, I have good legs. This is my race. People have to attack me. I don't have to attack them. And so, and he's, like you said, he's got a really great team around him, which is just going to give him that extra little bit of confidence. I expect big things out of him today, and even if he doesn't have the legs, he's going to die on the sword trying, and give it everything he's got on that climb. You do what you have to do to respect the race lead, and we expect that he'll do that.
And what I liked about his interview last night, if we listened to it, he's pretty confident in his climbing legs. He said he might not be the very top level climber, but he can hang with those top level guys. So it'll be great to see how he fares today at the end.
Yeah, and Eric, this is a place where you can use a guy like that for the EVOC bike team, to have those riders that can make it 80-90% up the climb and drop your leaders off. He's going to be really valuable to the team if he's not the leader himself. But there's so many strong riders on that EVOC bike team, it's going to be tough to know who their leader will be out there today.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and for himself, like he said, he may not be the best climber, out in this field, but if he has good legs and he has a team around him, even if he gets dropped from that lead group, if he can have 3 or 4 of his teammates help maintain that gap and keep it small and keep it reasonable, then he might find himself in a place to be able to compete tomorrow. Tomorrow is not a mountaintop finish. There is a substantial climb with the Gila monster, but there's some nice rolling and descent after the top of that climb, and about a 400-meter sprint finish at the end there. And that might play well into his favor based on what we saw yesterday. So he's got to have the mindset of survive, minimize gaps if he's not able to go for the win, and see what he can do to compete for this GC.
And to add on to that, I think a climb like today's climb, if you sort of look at the profile of the climb, there's an initial 2-3 kilometer ascent, and then there's a little bit of a flat section in the middle, a little bit of a plateau before you do the final climb. So something like that little respite in the middle where it's a little flat, a guy like that can maybe recover and put in a pretty good performance on that last little kick up towards the finish.
Yeah, they had a really nice mix of courses for this weekend with the flat criterium, the mountaintop finish up to Mongollon, and then the very lumpy profile with a major climb up to the Gila Monster on Sunday. So I would say something for everybody, but you got to like climbing to come to this race. That's for sure, Eric. The real life stage race is a 5-day stage race, and there's a lot of climbing over those 5 days.
Yeah, no, it's and it's at altitude. So there's a couple of different factors there, but yeah, you need to have climbing legs if you expect to be competing for the overall here. There's a lot of guys that are big motors that come to this race because of the time trial. It's a really good opportunity to get a solid result at a UCI race in the time trial. The criterium, will bring some select sprinters that have the ability to climb at a high level. But those are people that are targeting individual stages, not the overall. And so all these different riders are going to have different goals, and the teams are going to have different goals coming into the race as well, which is really what creates the race dynamic, is those different goals and how they choose to carry out those plans.
Garrett, the other thing that a lot of riders talk about is the elevation. You talked about this a little bit yesterday, but you're hovering right around 7,000 feet for most of your time at Tour of the Gila for riders that come from sea level. That has an impact.
Yeah, it definitely does. Silver City itself, the town's at 6,000 feet. Tomorrow's race goes, up over 7,000 feet. Today's race, today's stage, you would drop down a little bit, and you're at about 4,500 feet. But then at the end, you're nearing, I think it's about 6,800 feet at the finish by Mongollon. And so it definitely takes a little bit of the your power, your top end out of your legs. So it's something definitely to consider. And a lot of riders who do well at altitude, riders that would train in Boulder, Colorado, etc., would tend to do well at the Tour of the Gila. So it's a true climbers type race. And if you were to compare it, someone like in the Tour de France, Nairo Quintana would do well at a race like the Tour de France, because he's sort of that high altitude type climber.
There's a couple different ways that riders go about preparing for this too. I mean, one, you mentioned it, is just live at altitude. That's probably the best way to train for it, is live there and train there. But for guys that can't do that, one of the best things they can do is arrive to the race as close to the race start as possible, so they're not spending too much time at altitude. But some new principles and practices are coming into play, where people are using sauna training to help increase their blood hemoglobin levels, and using sauna training as a means to prepare for altitude training. People sleep in altitude tents. That's another opportunity for them to, even if they're at sea level, to prepare for races like this. But it definitely adds another level of complexity to racing when you go to altitude.
A little bit of a split happening in the group as we take a look at the course profile for today, powered by VeloViewer. This is a tool that a lot of riders have been using to get the stats and a look at the profile of the course. 42.4 miles of racing today with a max gradient of 16% on the way up. Now, they end at right around 6,700 feet at the top of this climb, and you can see it's pretty straightforward for most of the way. But Garrett, once they take that turn off the main road and go up to Mongollon, it is up from there.
Yep, exactly. And you can see as we look, there's a little up, and then there's a little flat, and then there's the final red part here to the finish that is extremely tough, and you get into the alpine terrain.
You see a good look at some of the visuals along the course. The other thing I love about this course, Garrett, is you get a good mix of scenery, I guess we should say. There's lush green areas, and then once you get higher up, you turn off that main road. You kind of go into the scrub brush area. We're seeing the riders on the way up to Mongollon right now. And then at the finish, some pretty incredible pain faces, as we saw last year. This is one of those courses that you always remember and always makes for good photos, because these riders at the finish are absolutely cracked. But then you got to recover and get back to it on Sunday. So it's a tough stage.
talking about recovery and getting back into it, it looked like Ben Thomas there started to kind of find a sweet spot, find his rhythm, and he didn't look like he was pushing as hard as he was earlier. So that's good to see, and I think maybe the group is settling in a little bit now that we see a selection there.
And sort of going back to talking about the course a little bit, and what also adds to the complexities normally in today's stage is it's also pretty open compared to tomorrow's the Gila Monster stage. Today's stage is pretty open, pretty exposed, and especially going up that final climb, it tends to also be pretty hot as well because the sun in the southwest at a little bit of altitude down here is pretty intense, and when you're exposed to going up that climb on the limit, it gets pretty hot.
Eric, this is another thing we talked about a lot in the early season racing, seeing everybody's pain cave and watching everyone get set up. A lot of fans, as the battle to stay cool is super important for these riders on the trainer.
Yeah, in real life, riders might be doing things like taking hand-ups of ice water bottles and spraying that on their back or over their head. They might be taking nylons and filling those with ice and putting ice socks down their shorts to stay cool. And then clearly you have the natural cooling of the wind as you're riding at 20, 25 miles an hour. Indoors, you don't have that natural wind, and so the ambient heat around your body increases. Even if your house is at 68 degrees, the temperature immediately around your body is probably closer to 80, 85 degrees. And so you have to have those strong fans to cool you off, and you have to remember to stay hydrated. Even though you're riding indoors, you're stationary. Those are sometimes things like where I even need to put a sticky note on my device in front of me, like reminding me, make sure you drink, because it's easy to forget to do indoors.
Yeah, Garrett, would they be fueling up on a day like today? Would you expect to eat during 2 hours on the bike?
Yeah, definitely. You'd probably have some sort of, drink mix, and then, a lot of just very simple type sugars, your gels, things like that. In regards to solid food, I think most people would shy away from that on a day like today. Eric mentioned before, we're talking about 90, 95 minutes of racing. So you may want a gel or two and a little drink mix, and that should suffice for a day like today.
We should see plenty of riders reaching for the trash can after a hard trainer effort, Eric. It's just something about riding on the trainer, I think, sometimes brings that food back up for a lot of riders.
Yeah, I think we should see in the interview afterwards and just ask people, what was their plan coming in, hydration-wise, nutrition-wise, through a race like this. I would anticipate that people are probably going through upwards of 4 gels, maybe some shot blocks or something like that. But I'm guessing that folks are probably taking 3 to 4 gels, some of which would have caffeine in it as well during the effort today.
Les taking a little look off the front here. Go ahead, Garrett.
Oh, I was just saying, as Eric mentioned, the caffeine tends to give a little added boost as well. And I know some racers leading up to an important race would actually abstain from caffeine, so they wouldn't have any caffeine for the couple weeks leading up to the race, just so that you become more sensitive to caffeine during the race, and then you go back to your normal caffeine intake, and that provided a little extra boost as well.
That sounds horrible, having to give up caffeine for a few weeks before. I don't know if I would make it. I don't know if I'm dedicated enough to ride at that professional of a level.
I agree with you there.
All right, Jones getting swallowed up here, and it looks like there's a little truce being called in the group. Look at all the power to the left of the names of these guys. It's all green and blue right now, so that tells us this is the official term is straight chillin'. I think that's the scientific term that they use for what's happening out there right now.
I like that term. Yeah, I mean, we probably got 25 to 30 riders here. There we go. We got somebody squeezing a gel in right now. Right, if they're sitting in the green and blue zone, it's a great time to be able to slam a gel, get some water in the system, maybe even shake out the legs, wipe off the sweat, and just get comfortable again, because it's not going to be like this for long. There is going to be another attack. There is going to be another big effort that happens, and you want to make sure you're comfortable and prepared to do that.
I think a lot of the guys in this group are probably looking at this saying 29, 28 kilometers to go. Yeah, I'll let someone else do the attacking until we get a little closer to the finish here. Trying to count the riders here, get a better look at the overall situation, but looks like we're down to, let's say, 20 riders in this group. I think there's one sitting in the gap, and then 22 is the gap off. So let's call it 20 guys in this front group.
So I anticipate the group.
Oh, go Eric. Go ahead, Eric.
I was going to say, I anticipate this group to probably stay together to the base of the climb. I think their goal was to make it really hard, really early, get rid of as many people as possible, have their teammates that are strong enough to be there and help them on this climb. Have them stay in the group with them, and then it's every man for themselves once we hit the lower slopes.
Don't forget to pick up your official ERL merch at wearenations.com. I know Eric was rocking his hoodie earlier. If you're here cheering on a rider or a team, be sure to pick up some merch from the official ERL store at wearenations.com and try and help those teams and riders out. Get them a little bit of money flowing so they can do bigger and better things in the sport. That's a big part of what we're trying to do here in the Echelon Racing League, is help promote the teams and riders so that they can go on and do big things in the sport here, Eric.
Yeah, one of our goals with that merchandise store is to do a revenue share with teams. So, clearly the people that are running the store at We Are Nations will make a little bit, but the rest of that is going to go back to the teams themselves. And so we want to be able to use the Echelon Racing League as a means to create a more scalable and sustainable and visible sport for everybody. And so that means not only creating media opportunities for them, giving them the opportunity to make themselves more known through things like the race live stream or through articles in cycling media and whatnot, but also to help them financially through that revenue share piece. So if you do purchase product from the store, please know that you are supporting all of the teams in the league by doing so. And so thank you for your support that way. And you get some great product to rep your favorite team when you're out and about.
Looks like some surging starting to happen here as the power numbers going back into the red. Now there's a little uphill section here, just a lump in the road, we'll call it, but I think some riders trying to use it to their advantage and maybe try to get a split going. You see Melville up there leading the way, but everyone else responds. You can really tell what's going on, Eric, by looking at the back of the group. Sometimes it's hard to tell if the guys are driving at the front or not because the game is reshuffling them, but you can always look at the back of the group and see the riders falling off. That tells us that, yeah, this is definitely a sustained, concerted effort up at the front when you start to see riders get in trouble at the back.
Yeah, and those, just like in real life, like you have a little bit of lapse of concentration and you can find yourself off the back pretty quickly. I think we've all been there where we wanted to grab a drink, eat a bar or something like that, and a tack goes off the front. And you find yourself either spitting that bar out or just choking it down so you can get both hands on the bars and get back to the group. But those gaps, when the group is moving, they form quickly, and you do not want to be caught behind that.
Yeah, this is what we're talking about right here. Once just a little bit of time opens up off the back, you can really find yourself in trouble quickly. So that's why Jones is going into the red zone there, so he can get back into the group, back into the draft. That was a maximum effort of just a few seconds, but you want to minimize the time you spend in the red zone. But that is, if there was ever a time to go deep, Garrett, it is right before you're about to get dropped out of the group.
Yeah, you want to do everything to hang on just so you can benefit from that draft, because if you the draft at the back, you've sort of gone over your red line a little bit. It's hard to recover and get back in there, and a lot of times you just see the group ride away from you. So you don't want that to happen, especially with a big climb coming up at the end of the stage.
Here comes Ben Thomas
Brad,
making his way back up to the front.
Say,
Go ahead, Eric.
I'm starting to look at some of the team dynamics, and I saw Restart Racing had 4 riders in there of their 6 starters. Project Echelon had 2. Ben Thomas and his Tour 2000 team had 3. And so we've got some folks that are caught out and they're solo in this group, and then we've got some people that have some really good numbers around them, and that's going to come in handy later in the race when they need help closing those gaps that form unexpectedly, or playing some team tactics and being aggressive out on the roads.
Yeah, I'm looking at the jerseys up at the front of this group, seeing a lot of Project Echelon jerseys, Evoc Bike and the white jersey with black shorts up there. Restart Racing, another squad to watch for. That is the sort of green fade with the lighter green shoulders into the darker green shorts. That's the team of Jaden Yeager in the Echelon Racing League, who is taking this weekend off as he prepares for the Esports World Championships coming up, this week, Eric. We have several riders in the ERL that'll be representing the United States, including Wisconsin's own Jaden Yeager for the Restart Racing team.
Yeah. We on the men's side, we have both Brian Hodges and Jaden Yeager. Fortunately or unfortunately for me, I get to race Jaden throughout the year. I live in Wisconsin as well, and so we see each other almost every single weekend. It's a wonderful battle, and extremely nice guy, both on and off the bike, and a very powerful person. And then on the women's side, we have Jackie Godby, we have Krista Doble-Hitchcock, we have Christy Tracy, all representing in the Virtual World Championships on Wednesday as well.
Yeah, so Garrett, these riders looking at a big target coming up on Wednesday. Some riders deciding to take the weekend off from racing, and some riders deciding that they want to race. They want to get 3 days of racing under their legs. What are the advantages and disadvantages from a physiological perspective leading up to a big race like that?
Yeah, a little bit. It depends on your personal preference. I know when I was racing, I like to race a lot. By racing, I got fitness, I stayed sharp, etc. You got to balance a little bit of rest with that. But other times, if you can time it right and take a weekend off, like this weekend, for example, right, you might be fresh and perform really well on a Wednesday, so to say. So this is a 3-day race where you have 3 tough days of racing, separated by only a couple days of rest. For some individuals, that might be a little too much, and they might get a little stagnant. But with that said, if you sort of keep the intensity high for those couple days of rest, you can potentially do well on Wednesday. When you look at things like the Tour on the rest days, right? A lot of times they go out, they ride for an hour or 2 on a rest day. They ride kind of hard, just to maintain that feeling, and so their legs don't get basically heavy. So it can vary depending on the individual.
Eric, a lot of these riders are, they have coaches, they're running training programs, and sometimes you just have to listen to the coach. There used to be a certain school of thought of, I'm just going to ride by feel, right? The old school riders, but more and more we're seeing structured training programs, wattage-based training, and they're following very strict training regimens that are issued from their coach.
Yeah, no, we have amazing tools now, like Training Peaks would be a great example, where we can plan out calendars, and we can say, hey, here's your annual training plan, here's your training stress. Training stress is looking at your heart rate and your power output from each day of riding, and it looks at a cumulative effort of that over the course of multiple days, and it starts to predict what your fitness levels are. And so we can see this crossroads of, am I peaking in fitness and maintaining my ability to recover, or am I working so hard that my ability to recover is drastically reduced, and therefore in the long term I'm not going to be able to actually perform. And so there is so much data that we're collecting from these riders throughout the training calendar and racing calendar that coaches are making extremely high level and scientific decisions on what to do with them next.
And so what we're looking at here is when we look at the distance remaining, we're probably about, 10 kilometers or so from the final climb. So it'll be interesting to see if any teams push the pace into the climb, try to send someone up the road prior to the base of the climb, etc. We're starting to get down to the meaty end of the race here. And what I'll be interested in, especially from a fan watching, is once we start going up that climb, the last 10 kilometers or so, to watch some of these watts per kilogram power numbers. We should see a lot of in the reds, etc., and you'll be able to get a good idea of what watts per kilogram these people are expending or putting out on a sustained climb like this, and what you could aim for in your own training to be at a high level.
Yeah, Eric, explain these Ceres power zones that we're seeing, the colors to the left of the riders there. What do those denote? What do those mean?
Yeah, so all of these riders are going to be familiar with and have a very love-hate relationship with this thing called a power threshold test. And what they're going to do is for either 20 minutes or for an hour, they're going to ride at their absolute maximum sustained power. And that will give us a number called functional threshold power. Basically is saying, how hard can you go for an hour? What is your 100% absolute maximum? And then we use that number, that FTP number, to calculate these different zones. So we can determine what is your zone 5, or you're in the red, you're paying. I mean, you can only be in that position for 4 or 5 minutes without imploding. And then all the way zone 4, 3, 2, and 1. And so coaches will use these different zones for training purposes. Racers may use the zones in the middle of the race to figure out what type of effort is being required of them, and to determine, hey, do I have the capacity to try and get in a breakaway today, to make an effort here at the end of the race, or am I already close to redlining and I just need to sit and chill and find a way to conserve on the road.
It's like Restart Racing taking a little look off the front as this group still sits in at 20 riders, really not changing much. Eric, I want to talk more about the season. We talked a little bit at the top of the show about the makeup of the teams and how the season is structured, but just take us through the Echelon Racing League format, if you would.
Yeah, so we have 8 race weekends. The first race started here in November, and it will extend all the way through March. And those 8 race weekends cover 22 race days. Teams are required to have a team of 4 to 6 riders starting each one of those days. They may have a roster of up to 12 riders, though, so they have to pick and choose, just like in real life, which roster is going to perform best at which races. Across those 8 race weekends, so you can see the calendar here, we are assigning points on an Omnium-based scoring system. So we have not only individual race winners for the GC overall, or the grand contenders, but we also have a series overall for individuals and for teams. And so there's multiple competitions going on. There's races within races across this calendar. One thing we're excited about is the ability to bring consistent rosters and teams to races so that people have something to follow. They can start cheering for their teams. They get to know who the riders are, and we can build a following and a fan base here, which is something that people like Scott Morris at USA Crits have been trying to do with some success, and something that other people like Justin Williams at Legion have been talking about. And how do we continue to grow and build this sport? And that's one of the things that they feel is important, is consistency in riders and rosters.
Evoc Bike up at the front with Neil Ostenfeld. This is a rider that I've learned about racing in the Echelon Racing League. This is a guy I didn't know well coming into this series of virtual racing, but had a chance to meet Neil virtually, and he's turned out to be one of the strongest riders in this league. So it just goes to show you how these virtual races can start to build some reps of these riders and hopefully get them noticed to get them to the next level in either their virtual or real-life road racing or mountain bike racing or cyclocross racing ambitions. It's a tough market out there, though, that's for sure. So Echelon Racing League, a good way, really all virtual racing, a good way to try and help some of these riders build their brand and make them a little more valuable to teams when it comes time to start shopping around for contracts, Garrett. That's always a tough time of the year, but having a little bit of a following you can point to, having some results you can point to always helps when you're talking to the director.
Yeah, definitely. And at the end of the day, regardless of what type of racing you're doing, you're just trying to put together a good resume to show that, hey, look, I can perform, I can do well, because, you never know what type of rider directors are looking for, whether they're climbers, sprinters, etc. So the results that you can get show what type of rider you are, and potentially, hopefully, can get you a contract down the road. With that said, some people don't have those ambitions, right? They're just out there trying to race hard, have fun, enjoy the cycling community, etc. So it also depends upon the person's what their goals and desires are as well.
Yeah, we have a nice mix of those people in the league too, right? We have some folks that are their parents, they're working class, physicians or lawyers or whatever, but they're extremely talented athletes as well. And this provides them to fulfill all of those obligations, be present at work, be present at home with my family, and be present in the athletic space. So that's something unique about virtual racing. But it does, like you said, it brings to light some of these up and coming riders that may be looking for additional opportunities in a challenging market. And these riders need to not only be athletes, but they do need to be marketers, and they need to be able to showcase themselves and showcase their teams to show their value.
And
yesterday's winner, Thrall, go ahead.
Oh, and I say what also is nice about it is, for the already potentially professional cyclist who is sort of getting ready for the next season, as Eric mentioned, this is sort of the heart of the e-racing season, where maybe they can jump in a race or two just to sharpen their skill set, their high end a little bit as they build up for the start of their own road racing season that comes in the later in the winter, spring, and summer.
Well, these guys going to be turning off of the main road here pretty soon as they make that right-hand turn off of what is basically a freeway onto the climb up to Mongollon. I was doing a little bit of research before the start of the series here about the places that we would visit, and I'm fascinated by the area in and around Silver City, including Mongollon, the old mining town up there. It's basically a ghost town now, but at one point this was a major operation of mining. I talked to Dr. Scott Fritz from Western New Mexico University to learn a little more about Mongollon. It was fascinating what he told me. Take a listen to this. All right, maybe not. He was explaining the importance of Mongollon in the mining operations here. This is a huge mining area, and Mongollon was actually started after silver was discovered in the area by soldiers stationed at Fort Bayard, which is another landmark that we race by here at the Tour of the Gila. So around 1860 is when silver was first discovered, and Mongollon was one of the first big sort of company towns to pop up around, it was called the Little Fanny Mine. So one of the first big economic drivers in the area in 1860. So kind of some interesting history there.
Man, that's one of my favorite things about racing and all these different communities is learning little things like that and just having an appreciation for really the rich history that we have in this, in the country and in all these little communities. They're places that I probably wouldn't otherwise know about or visit. And so that's why these races are special, and these races are the heart and soul of a lot of the communities around the country.
And that's how I was introduced.
Up at the front. Sorry, Garrett, go ahead. I was trying to watch these riders. Looks like 3 riders trying to get away. I'll keep an eye on them, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's an exciting part of the race here. It looks like there's a couple people moving up, some surges going. But yeah, just briefly touch on before we get to this climb, and that's part of what brought me to Silver City, right? I did tour the Gila, experience with the area. I really liked it. And otherwise, I normally probably came to the area and would not have discovered it. So Eric brings up a great point with those are some of the the great aspects of racing.
More surges up the sides of this group as riders try not to get boxed in. Eric, I think there's a general feeling that something is about to happen here. These guys know when they hit that climb, it's going to go nuclear. And it's coming up here in just a few kilometers at 14K to go right now. So they're starting to get nervous out there in the group.
Yeah, I mean, one of the worst feelings or best feelings, depending on who you are and what your specialty is you're tired already. You've done a huge effort to make this front group, right? This is a very select group already. And then you look up the road and you just see this monster of a climb that you have to get to the top of. That can be extremely daunting or extremely motivating. But I'm really excited to see how it plays out. And this race is going to implode really soon.
All right, I'm going to see if we can get that clip with Dr. Fritz in before we get there, because it was really interesting to me. So let's see if we can play it.
Cliff is just one of several communities in the area. Cliff itself would be established in the early 1880s, really in the middle of what was and still is to this day a farming and ranching community. I think we have to keep in mind that this was the lands of the Chiricahua Apache, who had been promised a reservation that was to be called the Gila Apache Reservation in 1860, but it was never granted to the Chiricahua Apache. And that was because of the possibility of mineral deposits in the surrounding mountains. And so ultimately the Chiricahua are removed from this area that really then allows for the opening up of not only mineral or mining in the area, but also for the opening up of ranching and farming for the benefit of non-Indians. So it's within that context, then you see the establishment of Cliff, New Mexico occurring in the early 1880s.
Some interesting history there, some of the great mistakes of our nation as well, but it was really interesting to hear about the development of the area and how these towns related to each other. He was talking about how Cliff was sort of an agricultural town, and then they really operated to feed the miners that were up at Mongollon. So it just goes to show the vast difference of ecology in the area, Garrett.
Yeah, definitely. And mining plays a big part in the area, and there's still a handful of operating mines in the area that are big for the local economy. But what's been great, at least from my perspective, is that we've been, and a lot of people in the area's perspective, is that we've been switching more to an outdoor-based economy. Our trails are being improved in town here. We have Boston Hill, just some local trails in town. We have the Gila National Forest, which includes the Gila Wilderness and also the Aldo Leopold Wilderness. It's hundreds of thousands of acres of trails to explore. The Gila River, which the guys in the race actually rode over today. And it's a beautiful area, and the outdoor economy is going to continue to grow. So it's worth checking out. Hot springs, hiking, backpacking, mountain biking, you name it. We have it down here in Silver City.
Yeah, and Garrett, your school, Western New Mexico University, has also really embraced their surroundings with the outdoor program there. I understand they have like a gear rental facility where students can go get gear and try the outdoors.
Yeah, colleague of mine, Kathy Whiteman, she runs the outdoor program and has been working hard to get that going. We have gear rental services. They take kids out on trips to the Gila for camping. It's part of the orientation. So students that want to experience the outdoors, it's a great university to go. That's small. You get to know your professors, and you have access to tons of acreage of wilderness and forest land to go and explore.
Well, Brad, we're getting to the lower slopes here, and you can tell people are trying to find that right gear, try to find that right cadence. It is starting to get mixed up.
Yeah, I would expect to see this group of 20 start to shrink pretty quickly here as the resistance starts to increase on the trainers. Again, these guys are on smart trainers, which means that as the virtual road goes uphill, it gets harder for them to ride on the trainers at home. The trainers can adjust. They're connected to the game. And so right now it's starting to get tougher and tougher to turn those pedals. But looks like riders are starting to bunch up a little bit at the front here. Eric, do you think someone attacks off the front, or is this just more of a slow, steady grind up to the top?
I don't think we're going to be able to see anybody make a successful attack until it gets to 8 to 10%. Once we get to that percent gradient, that's enough where the draft really isn't a factor, where the watts per kilogram gap will pay off, and they'll be able to get a gap quickly, and closing the gap will require an exponentially bigger effort than it would when we're talking about 3 to 5%. So once we start seeing that slope get into the red, right now we're in the browns and greens. Once we see it get into the red, I expect to see some fireworks and for people to try to form groups of 3, 4, and 5.
We're watching Ben Thomas spending a lot of time out of the saddle, and it looks like maybe trying to communicate with his team a little bit. Saw a lot of riders with headsets on, earpieces, or just speakers next to their training setup, Eric. A lot of communication in the group, although I don't know what you can really tell the guys at this point. I think a lot of the strategy is based around trying to start breakaways and things like that, but are the teams really communicating at this point? Is there anything that you can tell your climbers?
I think the biggest thing is some words of encouragement, and then just trying to check and see, like, hey, how are you feeling? Just knowing I have legs today and I'm going to be able to follow a move, or I don't have legs today, I need to climb steady. If you have teammates around, that means that, I'm going to find Zach Nair, my teammate. I'm going to sit by him, and if he doesn't have the legs to close a gap, it's going to become my job to slowly and steadily do that for him so that he doesn't have to try to jump onto it.
So you see Thrall up at the front as we start at the bottom of the climb. You can see the percentage grade that they're going up in the top right corner of the screen. It's green right now, which means it's on a relatively small slope, only just under 3% right now, but that will kick up to up over 10% at some points in this race. So just keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on the slope as, we should be just turning off of the main road and making that right-hand turn up to Mongollon soon. So we'll see that continue to climb, and I think this tops out around 15, maybe 16% at some point before they get to the top of Mongollon.
Yeah, and what's going to happen here is we're starting to gradually lead into the climb. We'll have a little steep kicker, but then it's going to level off for a couple kilometers, and then where the real true climb starts is the last about 5 kilometers, where it's pretty consistently above 10%, and that's where the real race will start. And I'd be interested to see if someone can really put an attack in on that little steep kicker before that little plateau leading into the climb, and sort of put people in the red before you actually start the climb, and then see who can survive at the end.
I can tell you that in our community race, in the amateur race, we always have amateur races the weekend before the professional races, and those amateur races present an opportunity for amateurs to qualify and then compete in the professional races the weekend after. Our amateur race, we did the Gila Monster Climb, which we'll be doing tomorrow as a part of the Tour of the Gila. It's our final stage. But that did present some opportunities for, again, people to punch early on and get a gap early with a group of 4 to 5, and that group just consistently found that tempo, found that effort, and everybody else behind would have had to have put in an 8 to 10 watt per kilo effort for 15, 20 seconds to be able to close that down. And after you've been climbing for 10 minutes, being able to do that is nearly impossible.
Oh, taking a look one more time at the profile, we're going to see the second little bump that you were talking about, Garrett, about halfway from when they turn off of the main road until they actually get up to just before Mongollon. And that's sort of a launch pad. That can have some serious impact on the course. So if, like you said, if you can get away, you can launch something there. It could be really interesting. There's sort of two little bumps on the course. There's this one on the main road, but then you see the first little orange section on the way up.
Yeah, and then there's a little plateau in the middle, and then it really kicks up the last about 4 or 5 kilometers. And so if someone can get a little gap leading into the climb and can hold up the climb, we'll see what happens today. But it'll be fun watching their wattage, the watts that they put out on this final 5 kilometers or so.
Rolling and wide open for a lot of the course on the open roads, but then it does get a little more narrow. They get a little bit of tree cover on the way up, partially before they get up to the top. Look at this. Things really slowing down as everyone goes red on a 10% slope on the way up. Eric, this is it. We are climbing up to Mongollon.
Yeah, the legs instantly are going to hit a brick wall here. The guys that have the legs and have the ability to find that lower gear and spin the pedals, they're going to be successful. The guys that are going to struggle with that transition from the flat to the climb, we might see them out the back pretty quick here, and we already are seeing some gaps off the back of this field.
Melville surging a little bit.
And so this is a little bit of a precursor, and then it should level off a little bit, and then we'll get a kick up again. But this is a steep little section.
We'll see that gap off the back is about 12 meters. They have the ability to get back, but they're not going to want to wait too long. They're going to want to close that quickly because in this 7% gradient, we're right on the edge of them getting some draft assistance of probably 25 to 30 watts, which is enough to make a considerable difference when you're already hurting and putting big efforts in.
And it looks like Thrall's having some good legs out there. I've seen him on the front. He's been in near the front since he started this climb, so I'm looking forward to seeing how he can finish off today's stage.
Yeah, Thrall was confident in the post-race interview yesterday. He said, I'm a good climber in real life, but wasn't real sure how he would do in virtual racing. But so far, Thrall has been hanging in there as he's still in this group of what is now down to, let's say, 15, because they are starting to lose some riders off the back. I'll try and take inventory of who's missing here, but a lot of familiar names here, Eric. The cream really does rise to the top on a day like today.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes a special rider to be able to climb a substantial climb, a substantial mountain like this with finesse and be able to truly race it, not just time trial up it. There's really two different ways of climbing, and some folks can just go out there, they can push consistent power and work their way up it, and others have that ability to punch, settle, and then punch again. And those are the riders that I would expect to see competing for the win today. And for the guys that are good at the sustained power piece, they might be able to sit in this group, but they're probably not going to have a huge impact on the overall outcome.
And Eric, you mentioned the other day that this platform was actually thinking of at some point maybe potentially adding a wind element to that, and I think that would be excellent, because normally on this stage when we come up over this little hill and you can see it's maybe starting to level off just a little bit, usually tend to have some pretty big crosswinds in this little open valley section. It would be excellent to have a little bit of wind resistance to add to the difficulty of the course as well.
Yeah, I'm just going to clarify on that. That was my idea, pushing them to add it. I don't know that they're in a place to do it yet, so I don't want to get too many people's hopes up on that, or maybe hopes down on that. I don't know. That sounds difficult and painful in what already is a difficult and painful discipline. But I agree. I would love to see some innovations like that taking place, because it truly does impact the dynamic of a race like this.
I saw Cooper taking a little look off the front. He goes back in, another stage winner here in the Echelon Racing League. Took an early preseason stage win in the Real Road stage race. Cooper actually the partner of Jackie Godby, our women's leader, who we were talking about earlier, on her way to represent the United States at the Esports World Championship. So a power racing couple with Cooper and Godby.
Brad, looking at dynamics here, Restart still has 4 riders in the group. I am extremely impressed by that, and I think they're going to be a huge team to watch right now. Evoc has 3, Project Echelon has 2, Tour 2000 has 2 as well. Anybody that has more than 2 riders probably has the ability to gamble a little bit. But we see a solo rider, I think, in Bird here, taking a look off the front and being joined by Evoc. So let's see what this does.
Yeah, these guys had 2 in the group in the red jerseys, and here comes Thrall now, who you were impressed with earlier, Garrett.
Yeah, and I love this move because we're in that flat little section. We have maybe a kilometer and a half or so until we start getting into the real seriousness of a climb. So I like this move by these guys, whether it stays or not. It'll at least put everyone else that's in the main group chasing them on the rivet going into this final climb.
Yeah, I'm looking to see if anyone's going to go across the gap or if the whole group just ups their pace to try to bring back Bird and Thrall, a pair of Canadians escaping off the front with Oliver Dowd leading the way, the 3rd Canadian chasing at the front of the field. It's a Canadian invasion at the Tour of the Gila today.
Gotta love that. It is really special to have an international feel here, and to bring riders that otherwise might not be at the Tour of the Gila. I mean, some of the guys from the UK I've talked about, they didn't even know what the race was until we decided that we were going to be putting it on. And so it's really cool to expose them to this event and to the state of New Mexico.
All right, Bird comes back, and now it's going to be Michael Swart having a go. This is the first of the Restart Racing riders to launch, so Swart is going to take the lead. And look at this split. 4 guys now finding themselves with a little bit of space behind them as they try to find that magical formula, trying to link up. Right now it's Blackburn, Dowd, Swart, and Thrall, with Hardin and Wolf leading the chase behind them. It looks like they are going to tack this one back as we go on to, like Garrett said, the flatter part of this course. It kind of dips down a little bit before they hit the final kick up to the top at 4.6 kilometers to go right now. This is definitely going to be aggressive racing here, guys. The way that we saw them approach the bottom part of this climb, Garrett, I'm thinking that this is not the last attack that we've seen.
Oh, definitely not. And now it looks like they just eased up just a little touch, but we were on a flat slope back there, and the powers that they're putting out were 5-6 watts per kilogram, and those are extremely high numbers. So everyone should be pretty fatigued and tired going in this final last 4K, and we can see we're starting to hit the slopes of the main climb where we're at 7.5%, and I think stuff's going to start to shatter in the field here.
Yeah, just to give people an idea, the winning rides that we see in these Echelon Racing League races usually hover around 5 watts per kilogram, somewhere around there. So, and that's the average over the entire race. So when you see these riders going up into 6, 7, 7.5, maybe even watts per kilogram, those are serious efforts that they're putting in. So right now, these guys are hovering well above their averages. Most of these riders are at like 5.5, approaching 6 watts per kilogram, Eric.
Yeah, and that's what I would expect a rider of this caliber to be able to do for their 20-minute FTP test that we talked about, is somewhere around 5.5, 5.8 watts per kilogram. But that's their 20-minute effort coming in fresh. So to see them putting in this type of effort an hour into the race, knowing that they have almost 900 meters of climbing remaining, I mean, they're digging deep right now to do something special on this climb.
Under 4K of racing remaining here. You see the speed up in the top right corner as well at right around 18 kilometers an hour. But you can also see the course profile. You see it draws that line right in the middle of the upper right-hand box. So that is basically a view of the profile from the side. So it gives you a good idea of how this kicks up. So this is the start of the final kick up to the top on the way up to Mongollon as Zach Nair continues to push the tempo for Project Echelon. Nair, another interesting rider. He's actually going to be the director sportif for our World Championship team this week as they head to the Esports Worlds here. Zach will be directing the Team USA, so he'll be in the ear of those riders, giving them advice on power and strategy. Zach is also a talented coach. He knows all the technical stuff that goes into training and riding well in these series, so it'll be very cool to have Zach as our director sportif for the United States at the Esports World Championships this year.
Yeah, Zach just finished one place outside of qualifying himself for the Esports World Championships, which were the qualifiers for Team USA were on RGT. He took 5th. You had to be top 4. But he does a number of power analysis articles for Velo News, and he's studied the world of Zwift at a really high level and understands how it works. So he's going to be a great director. And he's a sports physiologist himself. That's what he went to school for at Marian University, where he raced collegiately. And so I think he's going to do a great job and hopefully support our team to a championship, to a win and a rainbow jersey.
Well,
more separation here. One by one on the way up.
Exciting.
Zach Gregg is on the front. He's also Project Echelon. He's a coach at Leeds McRae College, another really well-known collegiate program, and also a sports physiology, I think a doctoral or a master's student. So good to see. I'm going to be a little bit biased here, but my team putting in some efforts together. Evox got 2 guys there. We see Draft pushing the pace as well. And this thing is starting to really split up now.
Guidish with a good ride up here at the front as well. Remember, we saw his teammate attacking earlier, the old 1-2 from these guys in red, and now Thrall going to go over the top. Here comes Zach Gregg again. A lot of the same names here. This is going to be down to 5 really quickly. I think you're looking at these 5 right here. Guidish, Thrall, Bird, Nair, and Gregg. Those might be the 5 of the day here.
So,
yeah,
Eric,
I have to agree with you.
Yeah, who do you like coming out on top today with the last 3K remaining? I've been impressed with Thrall's efforts so far, and specifically the Canadians, but we also have some pretty strong Americans up there as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really tough call. I think it's going to come down to who did the best job of sitting in the group and conserving. You know, even though it was a really difficult lead into the bottom of this climb, there were certainly guys that did better of not showing themselves at the front of the race. There's names that we didn't mention at all that they got here and probably saved 5% energy relative to their competitors, and those are the people that I think will probably have the better legs at the top. It's a really difficult call from this group. I'm quite excited to see how it plays out.
Bird redoubling his efforts here, as looks like Zach Nair might be sitting on the back of this group just a little bit into 5th position. But still 2.6K of racing to go. That is a long time on the bike on the way up here with a 5.2% slope right now, and it gets even steeper as they get a little closer to the top. So these guys still have a long way to go until they get to the top. I wouldn't be surprised to see more riders dropped here or just a split, taking it down to maybe 2 and then a group of 3 behind them, as Thrall looks like he's going to try and get up to Bird here.
Yeah, it's a mano-a-mano fight here right now. Kind of equal gaps all the way back through that top 5, and everybody's just doing what they can to stay there. Hoping that probably that those 2 come together. There's maybe a little bit of confusion between the 2 of them on who's going to be doing what, and then these 3 behind can catch back on. But if I'm in that group of 3 behind, I think I'm going to grab the bull by the horns if I catch back on, and probably be the next one to put an attack in while I know everybody's already hurting.
Yeah, Garrett, they always say the best time to attack is not when you're feeling good, it's when everyone else is feeling bad, right? Well, unfortunately, you're probably feeling bad too if everyone else is, but you want to go on the hardest part, just where it seems like you don't want to attack because you need the recovery. Well, everyone else probably needs the recovery too.
And we're hitting 13% right now, so this might be the perfect time.
Yep, exactly. Well said. And I'd almost say racing on a virtual platform, going up a climb like this, is harder than in person, because in person you can just stare at the hub in front of you, the wheel in front of you, and just follow that. Whereas here, you're on your trainer alone in your your trainer space, and you don't have necessarily that wheel aside from on the virtual screen just to stare at and go at. So I'd almost say that increases the level of difficulty of a climb like this.
Yeah, Eric, you talked about changing your camera view for racing from the third-person view up above or behind to the first-person view to make it a little more realistic in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It just helps me narrow my vision a little bit, not worry about too many of the other things that are going on around you. Actually, Zach Gregg, one of our riders, and I were talking last night. He struggled yesterday in the crit with drafting and trying to figure out where to be in the group. And that was one of my big suggestions to him, was to try that first-person view. So I'm interested to see if he actually followed that instruction and if that helped him today. But clearly he's on a much better day than he was yesterday.
Greg and Thrall trading blows up at the front. And that opens a little bit of a gap at 1.7K. Go ahead, Garrett.
You look at some of the power numbers, and you're seeing, 7.5 watts per kilogram from some of these efforts. So they're going maximum effort right at the moment.
A bird struggling to stay into the red zone to close the gap, gets back in there. That's going to be happening more and more, Eric, as these guys get closer to the top. The riders that are on the ropes already, and I don't know who those riders are in this group of 5, but there are definitely weaker riders in this group of 5, and you're going to start to see them fall back a little bit more as we get closer to the top. I think Bird and Goydish, remember, the 2 early aggressors in this group of 5 seem to be having the most trouble now.
Yeah, the way I always explain it to people when we talk about what it feels like to be at the top of a climb and duking it out is like you're in the 9th round of a boxing match. You've already taken a bunch of blows, and you might be willing to take a few more blows just so that you can hit the knockout punch. And that's what everybody's waiting for, is the opportunity to deliver the knockout punch. And they're just trying to limit their losses and not fall off the back, but they're waiting for that right time to attack here in the 9th round, because we're almost to 1K to go. There's not a ton of time left, and if they want to gain time on their major competitors, they're going to have to launch at least with 500 meters to go to get a few seconds there. We'll see what happens.
Now look at this. Bird's fortunes are changing now as he finds himself off the front again. Bird and Thrall have really locked on to each other. I think Thrall seems to be maybe the most responsive rider out of this field when groups go. And then Thrall's going to go right over the top. Look at this. This is Thrall's move right here into the red zone. He is going now. He's going to go all in on this move for Tom Thrall. Yesterday's winner trying to repeat today here, Garrett. I love this move. This is an all or nothing ride for Tom Thrall right now.
Yeah, and it looks like he's just riding away from the group. We have Guidish that's coming up and trying to close the gap, but there's a kilometer to go, and Thrall's looking pretty good, and he might be the cream of the crop so far.
That was 10 watts per kilogram for about 8 to 10 seconds there. So that was a huge effort, very calculated. He knew that was his moment to go. He just kind of stuck the dagger, and now we'll see if it sticks.
With Thrall having a
next level
weekend here, Garrett.
Yeah, and I loved his confidence that he displayed yesterday. So he knows he had good legs, and you could see him today. He was animating in front of the race most of the stage today. So he's putting in a tremendous ride.
All right, past 750 meters to go now to the top.
It's looking like Thrall might be able to hold off the group here and take a second stage. I mean, with 107 meters on the chasing group, I don't know that they're going to be caught. So we'll see what happens here. I think it's going to come down to a race for second between Goydish, Greg, and Nair. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think Thrall did it today. The attack inside the last kilometer may have paid off here as he goes inside 500 meters to go. Looks like Goydish and Greg will be the next 2 behind him, but Thrall is going to solo to a win here. And look at this. He's even down into the orange zone. Now, technically, that's supposed to be the VO2 max. He's going to be floating between orange and red here probably for the remainder of this climb. It's only 370 meters, but it seems like the hardest 370 meters of Tom Thrall's life right now as he climbs to the top of Mongollon.
Yeah, definitely a heck of a ride for Tom, and and this select group of 5 that we have today, they'll play a prominent role tomorrow. So keep these 5 names in mind as we head into tomorrow's stage as well. But yeah, impressive ride by Tom Thrall.
And this is only going to be another, brick on top of his stack of confidence already. So I don't doubt that tomorrow he's going to come out swinging again. He's going to have good legs, and I don't expect him to sit back and wait for it as he's coming through the hoardings, coming through the banner here. I wish he could throw up his hands and we could see him celebrate, but this is a heck of a win by Tom Thrall.
Well, Thrall is going to solo to his second victory of the weekend. After winning the Criterium yesterday, Thrall takes the win today. Here's the battle for second with Gradish and Nair, although he should be fine for a silver medal. And then Zach Nair is going to be battling with Zach Gregg for the bronze position here, as Gradish will hit the line in second. The silver standard today, great ride for him as well. And then here's the battle for third with Bird and Gregg now locked in here. Maybe this is the battle for fourth. I think Nair.
Yeah, this is fourth.
Be,
Nair is going to come through in third. So his third place of the weekend, finishing third yesterday in the crit. See if Zach can pip him at the line. No, it looks like Bird takes it, but a heck of a climb by all 4 or 5 of those riders. Amazing performance.
And yeah, the 2 Americans there in second and third, Gradish and Nair, put in a good ride, and they got distanced by Thrall, but they sort of they kept their own pace and they maintained the gap. So they're right up there as well.
Yeah, Garrett, I don't know if this ever happens in real life where a rider can win the Criterium and then come back and win the Mongollon Day the next day. Typically, we see 2 very distinct types of riders winning at the Tour of the Gila on these very different days between the Crit and the Mongollon Day.
Yeah, definitely. And, there's some very talented folks, and this, Tom might be one of those guys. I know I had a teammate, Gord Frazier, who is mainly a sprinter, but certain times a year he could climb with the best of them. You look at riders like Peter Sagan, right? He can climb pretty well and also finish strong. So we'll be interested to see tomorrow when it's maybe a little bit more mountainous. This was a mountaintop finish, but with that said, I think some of these really strong riders who have a good sprint can also hang on a day like today. So we'll see what tomorrow brings.
The final riders in our top 10 finishing up. Looks like Ben Thomas, our series leader, will salvage an 11th place today. Here's Charlie Ravel rolling through in 12th. So still a good ride here. And remember, the time does matter here for these guys looking at the GC at the Virtual Tour of the Gila. But again, the points for the race will go towards the series finishing. So these guys do need every second. Every second counts on the way up, as these guys are coming through 1s and 2s on the way in.
And they were moving today, because remember at the start we predicted that maybe it'd be around 90 minutes of race time, but they finished in 75 minutes, something like that. So they were moving along at a pretty fast pace today.
All right, Jonathan Crane on the way through as well as we work our way through the top 20. We're going to take a short break. I'm going to try and chat with some of the riders, and we'll come back and see what they say and get ready for our women's race at the Echelon Racing League. See if I can get... There we go. Zach, can you hear me now?
The world is changing.
I'm looking to do things better.
To improve.
Just because it's always been that way doesn't mean it's right.
I embrace change.
I seek adventure and discovery.
I explored and explored.
To know the unknown.
Even in the toughest moments, we ride together.
Even in the moments when we're at our limits,
We support each other. It's time to move up a level.
push that little bit harder.
Changes we make now will make the future better for all.
The efforts we put in today
Will pay dividends tomorrow.
We all have the power to up the game.
Build something better.
It's not time to play. It's time to get real.
It's time to be a game changer.
As an athlete, getting marginally better is one thing. Getting exponentially better puts you in a whole new ballgame. Biomoto uses a proprietary digital process to capture movement at 200 frames per second and 70 sensors per foot to measure ground-based forces, resulting in advanced motion analysis that's up to 10 times more accurate than orthotics. It's the data generated by this process that allows Biomoto to construct custom insoles that make athletes faster, stronger, and more stable, and result in an unprecedented 95% success rate.
All right, we are out here, Camino Escuela in Tucson, Arizona, for the first ever Camino Escuela Hill Climb Championship. Competitors here. Sean is going to be rocking the e-bike, the new Subito e-bike, weighing in at like 30 pounds, an additional, I don't know what that does, 200 watts. Heather, all natural. The course, I mapped it out earlier, it's about 1.3 kilometers. I think it gains about 30 to 40 meters, that's around 100 feet, and it's just short of a mile. Yo! Shooting at the demons, see your dreams, making them more fun. Yeah. And if you wanna run away from the best you've done, yeah, I'll be there to save the day. I'll be your rising sun.
Have you ever had a feeling that, like, there's no hope anymore? And then someone walks in your life and just light it up? Or more like screw it up again? Well, I guess this is the main reason why I'm writing this song. I heard you calling, I saw your sleepless face and I fell hard. I guess I'm falling for you, girl, I can reach the stars. Now. Oh, the nights we couldn't sleep, I was there carrying my gun. Shooting at the demons, see your dreams, making them more fun. Yeah. And if you wanna run away from the best you've done, yeah, I'll be there to save the day. I'll be your rising sun. Alright, that just happened.
Yeah, I'm the champ. That was crazy. I mean, I hit my button and she had no chance.
I thought I was dropping you. And you were just messing
I
with
was stretching, getting ready for my effort. I did a little bit of this, one of these, and then I just went.
We thought you were like getting dropped too.
this is how it feels. I feel so powerful right now.
All right, welcome back. Our pro women on the line, just under 6 minutes away from their start as we get ready for our second race of the day here at the virtual tour of the Gila. While we get a little time, I want to bring in a special guest here as we welcome Axie Navas, who is a former bike racer herself, but is now the director of the New Mexico Outdoor Recreation Division. Axie, thanks for being with us today. Tell me about your job and what you do at the New Mexico Outdoor Recreation Division.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be joining this morning. And yes, my name is Axie Navas. I'm the director of the Outdoor Recreation Division, and I think it's honestly the best job in the world. I get to be a cheerleader and advocate for New Mexico's great outdoors, including its amazing road biking scene, its mountain biking scene, and it's a privilege every day to be able to do that, to be able to talk like folks like with you and say how great this space is for all these great outdoor recreation activities.
And now I understand you have some firsthand experience at the Tour of the Gila, having done the event yourself. Is that right?
No, I haven't done it. So I'm a Cat 2 road racer. And I've done a lot of the big road racing series in the Midwest. So like Tour of America's Dairyland, for instance. And so I know a lot of folks, a lot of women who have raced the Tour of the Gila and have had so much respect for it. You know, from the very beginning. I think it's very fortunate as a New Mexican and someone who works in the Outdoor Recreation Division to be able to say New Mexico calls a race like the Tour of the Gila home. Pretty special.
One of the really special areas that we race through at the Tour of the Gila is the Gila National Forest, one of the crown jewels of the area, and one of the things that really makes Tour of the Gila what it is. Tell us more about Gila National Forest, how big it is, why it's important, and sort of where they race through.
Yeah, it's a truly incredible gem for New Mexico. So you're looking at the Gila National Forest and then the two wilderness areas within it, the Gila Wilderness and the Aldo Leopold Wilderness. And so within this huge expanse of land, you have some of the top outdoor recreation in the state. You have the Gila and San Francisco rivers that are both incredible natural assets of the area and then also economic drivers for some of our rural communities in Grant County, where Silver City is located. We have people come from all over the world to experience these waters, to go fishing, to go boating, to go hunting. It ranks in the very top in all three of those activities in the world, and truly a pretty incredible destination. And that doesn't even get us to the road biking and the mountain biking, which is also so phenomenal in the region.
Yeah, we're really starting to see a lot more people embrace New Mexico as an outdoor hub. I know you guys are hosting a lot more outdoor events, attracting a lot, before this pandemic hit, attracting a lot of events to come to New Mexico and, get their events in there. So it's nice to see that we're really starting to recognize New Mexico for the beauty that it has. Hey, tell me about the rivers that you were talking about. We were talking earlier about the wild and scenic designation. These are a very special rivers in the area.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm glad you asked. There's legislation moving through Congress right now called the MH Dutch Salmon Greater Gila Wild and Scenic River Act. Always a mouthful, but really important legislation for the area. It would turn both the Gila and then the San Francisco River, these two rivers that I mentioned, as wild and scenic. It would give them that designation, which in short recognizes their free-flowing vitality, their economic importance to the region. In fact, there was a study that just came out to say that those two watersheds in particular support over 5,000 jobs in the greater Silver City, Grant County, southwest portion of New Mexico. So we recognize them both as these prides of New Mexico, truly astonishing rivers for all these great outdoor recreation activities that we've talked about. And they're also economic drivers for the region where we now have some data specifically for those two watersheds to look at and to prove that point.
Oh, it's important work that you're doing out there, Axie. So a big thank you for helping to preserve these lands so that we can all come enjoy them in our outdoor recreation of choice. That's Axie Navas, director of the New Mexico Outdoor Recreation Division. Thanks so much for being with us today, Axie.
Thank you.
Well, it's all about trying to protect the important lands that we race on here at the Tour of the Gila as we get ready for our women's race. Taking a look one more time at this course profile, as it's not really about the distance today. It's about the climbing at the end with a max gradient of 16% on the way up to the abandoned mining town of Mongollon. They're going to pick up just over 3,300 feet of elevation gain. And as Garrett has been telling us all day, it's sort of a two-part climb. You can see the two orange sections on the way up. There's also that little bump in the middle on the main road, but once you take that right-hand turn, there's a short climb, then the plateau, and then the climb up to the finish. And as we saw in the men's race, Garrett, that is where the race is won and lost. You predicted it perfectly as we saw Tom attack right there on the flat section.
Yeah, really, just the last, I'd say probably 4 kilometers is where the real racing begins. But with that being said, a lot of the effort takes place to get in position for that last 4 kilometers. So if you're too spent in that last 4 kilometers, then your race is over. And we saw in the men's race that Tom Thrall put in an excellent ride and basically just destroyed the field.
Pro women getting underway now, and again, very similar to that men's race. You see everybody going into the red immediately as they do the unique start of virtual racing here, as everyone really wants to get their power up as high as they can when that flag drops so that they can start rolling. Here's a look at Krista Doble-Hickok wearing her Team USA kit. Now, Doble-Hickok is another rider that will be representing the United States at the World Championships this Wednesday and using this weekend of racing at the Echelon Racing League as an opportunity to try to build some fitness up ahead there. So this women's field is incredible, Eric. We have a standout group racing in the ERL. Few riders taking the weekend off here, but still some pretty heavy hitters in this field.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting to have our women really putting on a show. If we look at the overall standings of the series so far, the women have a really tight competition going on right now. And so it's going to be exciting today. I think we're going to have a very similar situation to what we saw with the men, where there's going to be 5 or 6 women that really pull away from the rest of the group and battle it out. But maybe we'll see something different here from the men early on leading into the climb, and maybe a small group can go on that little kicker that we saw the separation in the men's race. I know some of the women were watching the men's race, and so maybe they'll use it as an opportunity to learn a little bit.
You see Jackie Godby riding up at the front here, another one of our world champion riders that we'll be watching.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if, similar to the men's race, if Jackie can win the crit and this mountaintop finish as well.
Eric, there are very few riders that can thrive in all conditions in virtual racing, but Jackie Godby definitely one of them. Look at these results so far this season. From the World's Qualifier, 3 days of the Echelon Racing League in Borrego Springs on the Paterberg and on the Stelvio. She only missed the podium 1 day, and that was by 1 spot, and then a winner yesterday on stage 1 of the virtual Tour of the Gila. So Jackie Godby really is a do-it-all rider. She's also pursuing her PhD. She's actually been doing her residency. She's been doing residency interviews in between racing. So she's like finishing these Gila stages, then getting off, changing clothes, and doing virtual residency interviews for her residency at med school. Pretty incredible.
Yeah, maybe some of her success on the virtual platform is just her unwinding from the stress of doing those interviews. Really good opportunity to get on there and just let it all out. And so maybe that's what her secret is right now. I don't know.
Well, you know she's a special kind of person because she comes from a triathlon background. It takes a special kind of crazy to do a triathlon. So Godby she is a 3-time winner of the Chicago Triathlon in her home of Chicago, Illinois. So obviously a talented triathlete before she came to virtual racing, but really just started racing virtually this year with the pandemic, and she has taken quite a shining to it over the last few months. So good to see Jackie Godby riding up at the front here. Now, Godby rides for the XXX Athletico team. It's a club out of Chicago. We see them racing a lot in real life races, but she's wearing the USA kit because obviously she made that World Championship selection. So she gets to wear the Team USA kit up until the World Championships this week. So not wearing her Triple X kit, but we'll see her back in that after the esports worlds are over, unless of course she's wearing the digital world champions jersey, which yes, there is a rainbow jersey awarded to the esports world champion. It's sort of a pixelated world rainbow stripe that the riders will have to wear on their virtual avatars. So pretty cool stuff happening in virtual racing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be groundbreaking this Wednesday. We've been talking about how virtual racing is a discipline of its own. It is very different from time trialing, criterium racing, or road racing. And it is a discipline in its own right. And so the UCI and the national governing bodies are starting to recognize it as such. They started to put rules and regulations in place to help regulate what virtual racing looks like and how it's delivered. And now we're going to be crowning a world champion, which is extremely unique. And we'd encourage you to tune in on Wednesday and watch some of the riders that are racing right here in front of us. Give it a go and see if they can pull on those rainbow stripes.
AMD Foundation moving some riders up the left-hand side of the group. This is the team of Elena O'Mara, another standout rider here in the Echelon Racing League. O'Mara, third place yesterday, also a stage winner of the Echelon Racing League preseason event as we did those RGT railroads. Eric, this is another rider that we're going to be hearing a lot about. Just started racing a few months ago on the virtual platform, just started riding a few months ago, but got a coach, found the AMD Foundation team, and now Elena O'Mara is well on her way to being one of the top virtual riders in the country right now.
Yeah, and she's a standout runner in her own right. She ran for Michigan State University, and you don't do that unless you've got an engine. And so she's got an engine on her, and now it's just a matter of being able to pick up the nuances of racing. But the fitness is there, the engine is there, and clearly she's learned quickly. And another individual pursuing medicine and studying to be a doctor. There's something to it. She can pay attention. She's got focus and concentration, and she's able to pick up on little details and apply them quickly.
Yeah, Jackie Godby said straight up, so much of my med school was about just hanging in there, right? Fighting through the difficult times. And that's she draws a big parallel between that and racing. Garrett, sometimes it's just about who can suffer the most in a race like this. These riders, for the most part, are pretty well matched when it comes to fitness. Once you start getting towards the high end of fitness, there's not a lot of leeway there. So these riders are relatively close on what they can do. There's a big mental element of how hard they can push themselves.
Yeah, definitely. The mental aspect plays a large role, and often we hear things like overtraining, burnout, things like that, and a lot of that comes from our central nervous system, basically our mental aspect, and that plays a huge role in our performance. And I think from a sports performance standpoint, it's getting more recognition, but it's been overlooked for a long time, where we focus more on the physiology of the cardiovascular system, where there is a huge role played by our central nervous system in our performance, and that cannot be overlooked.
Well, now Krista Double Hickok moving up to the front, also in her Team USA kit. Double Hickok, another rider representing the United States. I think we have 3 riders in this field that will be wearing the Stars and Stripes this Wednesday, with Double Hickok, Jacqueline Godby, and Christy Tracy not racing this weekend. She decided to take the weekend off, trying to get a little rest, but just goes to show you the talent in this field, with 2 potential world champions racing out there today in Double Hickok and Jackie Godby. That's got to be pretty cool for you to see, Eric, thinking that some of your riders from the ERL might have a shot at wearing the rainbow jersey.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, just giving them additional opportunities to compete, to learn how to race in a discipline like this, to make their names known. And for me on the side, it's been really fun to get to know some of these riders, build some relationships with them, and have dialogue with them and their team directors. That's not something that I would normally get to do, but since the director of Echelon Racing League has provided that opportunity, and I've quite enjoyed it.
Well, now just playing the waiting game as we wait for this initial selection to be made. This group maybe a little calmer than the men as we start to see some riders shooting towards the front. But I think this might take a little while longer because we just haven't seen the early attacking that we saw from the men. A lot of those guys were going red for the first 2 minutes. Obviously, it's not a very good strategy. So maybe the women's field just a little smarter than the guys, playing it a little smarter out there in terms of conserving their power, conserving their energy. They probably realize how this one's going to go down. And a lot of these riders, Eric, will have watched the men's race as well. We heard a lot of riders yesterday talking about watching the men's race just to try and get some insider intel on the course or how the race plays out on the course.
Yeah, it would be no different than showing up to a race like a criterium early, walking around the course with your teammates, picking out different corners, picking out different elevation changes and such, and learning from the mistakes or the successes of the races before you. Being able to watch this broadcast of the men's race before the women's race certainly should give these riders some insights. Not only just watching the race, but even some of the commentary that we're providing could help them in the long run and make informed decisions on the road.
Here goes Stephanie Sidlick taking a look off the front for the Velocity Vixen team. Stephanie has also been a consistent rider in this field, riding at the front. In fact, even Jackie Godby was saying, I learned a lot from watching Stephanie race. She learned how to ride a consistent race because on the Stelvio day of the Echelon Racing League, a real road stage race, we saw big attacks at the front, and then Sidlick was just sitting back in third, fourth position, but rode it slow, rode it steady, and rode her way into a top 5 finish. So it was an impressive ride for Stephanie Sidlick. I think today might be a good day for her, although it requires some explosive power, so we'll see if she can sort of switch that on from the long sustained effort that we saw a few weeks ago. So, Garrett, things starting to open up here a little bit as they're on the road out of town, heading towards Mongollon, the old mining town up in the mountains. Take us through, if you would, what it's like from leaving the start in, I think it's Cliff, where they start before they head back out. What's the road like? What's the atmosphere like? Is it open? Is there wind? I mean, describe the scene for me on the way to Mongollon.
Yeah, traditionally, Mongollon, or starting from Cliff, it sits a little bit lower than Silver City. It's at about, 4,700 feet, and it's open. You're on Highway 180. It's often windy, strong wind coming from the left. There might be some dust. And then as you get towards the little town, before you take that right-hand turn up to Glenwood, you tend to get into some more bumpy, lumpy type terrain. Beautiful. You can see the Mongollon Mountains in the back that raise up to 11,000 feet. Or nearly 11,000 feet. Then you take that right-hand turn and you start climbing and you work your way up. You have this nice, beautiful valley that you get to before you hit the final 4K, and then you start getting into your pinyon, juniper type woodlands up to the finish near the town of Mongollon.
Hey, you talked about some of the wind coming from the rider's left side. Is the climb covered? Is the wind a factor on the climb? I'm seeing a lot of vegetation on the way up. Do you get a little bit of rest from the wind?
Yeah, so once you hang that right-hand turn and you start the actual climb, if anything, you tend to maybe have a little bit of a tailwind because the wind predominantly comes from the left or the west, the westerly winds. And then you have this little plateau before you get to the last 4K, and that can often be really windy as well because you sit up, maybe about 1,000 feet or 500 feet above the lower land, and that can get a little windy. But going up the climb itself, wind's not much of a factor.
Well, riders back into the green zone here. As we see riders continue to chase on at the back, but mostly just settling in. This looks like it's going to be a lot very similar to the men's race, Eric. Riders falling off the back until it gets down to maybe 15 riders, and then they start attacking each other. But maybe just trying to get rid of some of the bulk of this field before they really launch the big attacks.
Yeah, and right now you can see we're on a bit of a descent as well. -2, -3%, and in the RGT platform, even the smallest of gaps can shoot you out the back pretty quick from the draft. And so riders need to be really attentive here. You don't want to get gapped on this small descent. It's not super steep, but if you do, getting back into the group is going to be very difficult. And because of that, I think we are going to see a narrowing of the group and probably see 15 or so riders, be the story of the rest of the day from here on out.
What I think is interesting about, and I think great about this e-racing virtual platform is, as you mentioned in the women's group, the top couple of performers, one was a former triathlete and the other was a college runner. And on this virtual platform, as long as you have an engine, you can perform really well at these racing events. What'll be interesting to see is if these individuals can then learn the skills, and this can translate into success on the real roads as well. So it's a good benefit for people willing or thinking about maybe transitioning from running, etc. And physiologically, it's a lot easier to go from running to cycling than the other way around. So that's a good thing about this platform.
Well, already seeing some riders falling victim to the early pace. Here's Stephanie Sidlick, who we were talking about before. Sidlick off the back, but don't worry about her just yet, because this is, I don't want to say one of her specialties, but Sidlick is too strong to get dropped right now. So that was just maybe a lapse in attention, maybe a drop out of the power, something like that. So Stephanie Sidlick is definitely a rider that we expect to be in at least inside the top 10 for my money. So you'll see some riders starting to drop off the back, Eric. A lot of times it's just not enough power for a couple seconds, maybe a dropout if you have a Wi-Fi issue or something like that, but usually those riders can recover. It's about being able to cover those mistakes that you can get back into the group.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like in real life, crazy things happen in the virtual space. Sometimes we have flat tires, sometimes there's weird crashes, sometimes you get caught out on the wrong side of some traffic furniture or whatever. All of those things happen in real life, and we have things like power dropouts and whatever in the virtual space as well. And riders need to learn how to manage them and deal with them, how to keep their cool, how to get back to the group, and then ultimately how to prevent them. And so it comes down to mastering your craft and knowing how to make it work for you.
Yeah, Garrett, I always thought that was the true mark of a pro on the road, was how they dealt with the mechanical, usually a flat tire. You can tell who's been there before and who hasn't. The pros know how to stay calm. They just calmly get off the bike, maybe undo the quick release skewer if they want to try to help the mechanic out. But you see a lot of amateurs panic. They're like, how can I help? I'm going to take the wheel off. I'm going to try and get ahead of the mechanic. But the riders that have been there before know to just stay calm. It's going to get fixed as soon as it can. And you just have to kind of trust in your team, trust in the system, and trust in your mechanics.
That is correct. And I think it goes actually a little bit of both ways, right? Not only the rider experience, just simple stuff, knowing what side of the road to pull off on, etc., to get your tire fixed, shifting your gears all the way down to, the bottom so that it's easier to change your tire, etc. Well, with that being said, then your team drivers or your mechanics are a lot better as well, compared to the amateur level. They're quicker at, putting your tire in, helping you draft you back to the field, etc. Whereas a lot of times in the amateur level, you get your tire changed and the car is gone, and they don't help you get back to the field at all. So sticky bottles tend to be very helpful when you're trying to get back to the field.
I remember my first experience with a professional mechanic. We were just at a race in the Midwest. I think it was actually Super Week back in the day. And I took my bike in, and it was like everything I had done wrong, right? The quick release was on the wrong side. It was facing the wrong way. I was in the wrong gear trying to get the the wheel taken off. So it's just one of those things that you kind of have to learn through experience. And it's the little things that contribute to making these riders pros, to the overall sort of a canon of being a pro. So the dealing with mechanicals is just one part of it. But yeah, Eric, it is a whole new breed of mechanicals here in 2020. Now we have virtual and technical mechanicals as well.
Yeah, yep, it is. And like I said, it just comes down to the ability to manage stress, to troubleshoot issues, and to make sure your equipment works for you. That means pre-riding courses. That means using the platform frequently and becoming familiar with it. All things that we would expect a professional to do on the road and in real life. Just because you're at your own home and doing something on the internet doesn't mean that it doesn't require some effort and special attention.
I actually saw one of the... go ahead, Garrett.
Oh, I was just going to say, I know from personal experiences, virtual mechanicals result a lot more cussing for me than actual mechanicals out on the road.
Some things are easier to fix than others, that's for sure. I would much rather try and put a chain on than try and diagnose my Wi-Fi network. I have a much better chance of solving the first than the second.
No, but going back to... Go ahead, Brad.
Yep. I was just taking a look at Godby on the front, still sitting in here. And nobody really causing any separation, so I'll keep an eye on that. But what were you going to say, Garrett?
Oh, and just, even speaking back to mechanicals and going back to team cars, etc. And even when you're experienced, not just being an amateur makes it, harder for mechanicals. I remember one time, after going back to the team car, I had loaded up on bottles and my handlebar got stuck underneath the passenger side mirror. And eventually the car took off and my handlebar eventually broke free and I ended up in a ditch and I hit a barn and my bottles splashed everywhere and whatnot. So it can happen to anybody, anytime.
And then the amazing part of being a bike racer is you probably got back up, collected the bottles, and were like, put me back out there as long as nothing's broken on the bike. It's you got to be pretty tough in this sport, that's for sure. And luckily, there's no virtual crashing yet. I don't think we've seen anybody have any virtual crashes, though some riders have been reporting that at the end of the races, they're a little wobbly when you get off the bike, right?
Yeah, no, I think between the legs just being completely cooked and trying to unclip and step off can definitely be a challenge. And then some of these riders are actually racing on rollers as well, which is extremely impressive. And that would be more, a really hard task to stay focused on all of the data that's on the screen and making in-race decisions while also riding the rollers is something that would be really impressive. But some of these riders are doing it. But if we're going to see a crash, it's probably going to come from that scenario.
I don't think that's written into the game either yet, Garrett.
Yeah, no, and I was wondering, do they... as a racer in these platforms, I know using a trainer yourself, when you're starting to put out these big powers, do they do anything at all to clamp the trainer down or the bike down on the floor just so it's not moving all around when you're putting out some of these big power numbers towards the end of these races?
Yeah, there's been some articles that have been put out there, one of which was by Holden Camo, who races for Saris the Pros Closet, will also be on the U.S. national team on Wednesday, but he was one of the first people to talk about how he weighted down his trainer. Saris, who is a sponsor of the league, they have a trainer platform called the MP1 that works with really any type of trainer, but that's really built specifically for trainers like the Hammer H3, which is a direct drive trainer that is connected to that platform, and then it wobbles or it moves underneath you to give you a more realistic road feel, and then helps to kind of minimize that fatigue and to work additional muscle groups. So people are coming up with different innovations to create a more real road feel and to secure their trainers.
I see Jen Real back on the front, had a good ride yesterday. Cecil Lejeune also moving up, the French rider for the Canyon Esports team with, of course, Jackie Godby, always in the mix. And looks like Eleanor Wiseman also sitting up there into third position. All right, well, these riders try and get this sorted on the front. Let's do another little history lesson here, guys, from the virtual tour of the Gila. This next one comes from Dr. Cynthia Bettison. She is a professor at Western New Mexico University, and more importantly, at the Western New Mexico University Museum. It is the home of the Nan Ranch Collection, the largest and most complete collection of Mimbres material in existence from a single prehistoric member. Mimbres site, and it's also the largest and most comprehensive permanent interpretive exhibition of Mimbres pottery and artifacts in the world. Now, I talked with Dr. Bettison earlier in the week about some of the cool things at the museum here, and this was my favorite piece. She talks about a specific piece in the museum.
People really like to see these vessels that they've seen just published everywhere on the internet. When they come here, they get really excited by our corn beer brewing vessels, or what we call the maize beer brewing vessels, because it is something unique to the Nan Ranch Ruin. It's a very specific room that was built, we believe, only to make corn or maize beer. It has everything to process it and these huge vessels to brew it in. It doesn't have anything else in it other than things that have to do with processing corn or maize, and then brewing it, and then adding water to the mixture. And we think it's part of a feasting complex where folks came from the hinterlands into various sites in the Mimbres Valley. The one that I know the best is the Nan Ranch Ruin, because I worked there in '81. So that one in particular, we have the collection here, is still producing information we didn't know. And one of them is that there seems to be a specialized room for brewing corn beer for these hinterland gatherings where people are probably bringing in from outside in the hinterlands. They're bringing other kinds of foodstuffs in, and there's a celebration and I don't know, I guess you could say a really good party with corn beer.
How about that, guys? The world's first microbrewery right here, just off the course from where they are. Some pretty cool stuff at the Western New Mexico University Museum. And we'll hear more from Dr. Bettis later on in the race. Meanwhile, this group of four has found themselves away off the front. We watched them starting the break just before we went to that piece with Dr. Bettison. But Rial, Lejeune, Galbi, and Wiseman, your four riders away here, and then Stephanie Sidley trying to lead the chase with Krista Doble-Hickok. This is another great part of bike racing, and one of the things that carries over from real racing into virtual racing, Eric, working together with your teammates. This is a classic tactic in pro cycling where these riders all have the same goal back in the field of chasing down this breakaway. So even though Stephanie Sidlick and Chris Doble-Hickok are technically competitors in the race, at this point they might as well be teammates, because they're going to work together trying to get that to the pace line in RGT to improve their chances of catching this group of four up the road.
Necessarily this point in the course, but I like it, and we'll see what happens or results from it.
Boy, this is now or never for the riders back in that second group. Now, easier said than done to say you just need to close this gap. I mean, if anybody knows what needs to be done right now, it's Krista Doble-Hickok. And you can see looking relatively calm on the trainer. I mean, really not panicking just yet. She knows the gap is still somewhat manageable, so just doesn't want to go too hard, as she doesn't make sure she doesn't want a red line here to make sure that when she does get into that group, she at least has something left in the tank. So, Eric, looks like the field is actually keeping this break of four relatively at bay. This is not a big gap.
Group, but we have people like Crystal Doble-Hickok. We have Maddie Ward, who just signed to Team Tibco, but is racing for Amy D Foundation here. We have Megan Easler, who was another runner. She's from Iowa State University on Project Echelon. She is in the group still. So we have these people that are going to start working together to bring that group of four back so that they can reset the race and start from ground zero again.
So, Eric, a question for you. How, from a virtual standpoint, how do these racers organize themselves in the group to start chasing these four leaders out on the front? It's hard enough when you're in person, but how does that occur in a virtual setting?
Yeah, that's a great question, and actually, the best way to learn how to do that is by doing a team time trial event. So every week, RGT runs a team time trial event that you can do with anywhere between 3 and 8 riders, I believe. You can do it at any time, and you submit your time, and they have this weekly competition. But that's the best place to learn, and it does work exactly like it would in real life. The person in front takes the entire effort. They need to have a calculated, pull of, maybe 5.5 watts per kilogram for 30 seconds, and then they need to be able to pull off. So they need to rotate through. They need to do it smoothly. We can't have these huge jumps where they get gapped off. It needs to be a concerted group effort. And so it's a difficult thing to learn. It's easier to do when it's all your teammates and you're communicating with one another. And when you have multiple different teams that can't talk, it becomes much more difficult. Similar to if we saw an international race and we had a French rider, a Spanish rider, an American rider in there, trying to get them to communicate on how they're going to work together can be difficult.
Well, these 4 riders certainly working together in the chase as Easler, Double Hickok, Boville, and Matty Ward, the Amy D Foundation rider, tacked onto the back there. Definitely sitting in that slipstream. They have figured out that drafting, just like this group before. You see Godby leading the way up at the front. And look at the difference in colors. Godby, the only rider in the yellow zone, Lejeune in blue and green, Wiseman back there as well. So that's a good example of just how realistic the drafting is on RGT in these groups and how well these riders can work together. Gap is starting to grow back to the group for 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. It's about 70 meters right now back to this group. They've still got them in sight up the road, but Eric, it looks like this one is trending the wrong way for the chasers here, and we haven't even hit the bottom of the climb up to Mongollon.
Yeah, so I mean, it's that rubber band effect. You're going to do what you can to keep them at bay, but you only have so much energy and so much time to overcome that gap and to bring it down. And so, if they weren't able to respond quick enough, work well enough together, that group of 4 who is equally working just as hard and just as efficiently to get away is going to win that battle. The question is, can they sustain this effort, go into the climb, and then maintain the group or maintain the gap, or is one of these folks going to just run away with it, and then we see the other 2 or 3 from the front group drop back, get caught by people working together in the second group, and now we have a good race for 2nd and 3rd place.
Coming up on 28 kilometers of racing to go. This is sort of the middle section of Highway 180 here, where it kicks up just a little bit. You can see the average grade at 2.5% right now. So kind of like a false flat out there, Garrett. A lot of times this can be the most painful part of the course. If there's a stiff headwind or a tough crosswind, you got a long 2% false flat gradient, that hurts. I mean, that really takes it out of you when you've been out there for an hour or so.
Yeah, definitely, and especially, if the other conditions, if the road's a little more rough, and exactly also where the wind's coming from. If there's a slight crosswind, how the race is shaking up right now almost looks like there would be a big crosswind going on. You have these small little groups, they're sort of riding in an echelon, and they're going pretty hard. So I'll be interested to see once we get to the climbs, the speed slow down a little bit, if they'll all come back together, or if the front group will continue to ride away.
I'm wondering if at some point Krista Double Hickok will try to leave this chase group solo on her own, maybe thinking it's just not working out if we try to ride together, and the gap continuing to grow up to 220, 230 meters now. Back to Krista Double Hickok, so she might have to at some point just go all in on trying to bridge this gap across, although it looks like she is just going to sit on the back of this group. You guys got to remember, Double Hickok representing the United States at the World Championships this Wednesday, so Garrett, not a whole lot of time to recover between a 3-day stage race that's going to wrap up tomorrow, Sunday, and a 1-day important race on Wednesday. So maybe a Double Hickok thinking better to try to save some, don't quite red line here this weekend, so she could be maybe a little fresher for the World Championships on Wednesday.
Yeah, and as we talked about a little bit earlier in the broadcast, there's, everyone's a little different, and some people actually do well with some racing. And if she can time a recovery pretty well over the next couple of days, sort of take an easy day on Monday, and then maybe some little bit of easier but a little bit of effort on Tuesday, she might be good and ready to go on a Wednesday type race. So there's a little bit of personal preference to that as well, that coaches need to consider.
That gap is starting to come back down again, though. We're back at 126 meters. So it's getting closed down a little bit by this group, and it looks like they're rotating through pretty well and pretty smooth now. So maybe it just took a little while for them to get in a rhythm, figure out their position in the group, understand who's going to rotate through and when, what kind of lengths they should be taking those poles at. But we'll see. I mean, they're not the rubber band hasn't broke yet. They're still hanging in there really well.
I think they're getting a few more riders coming up to help them in the chase group as well. I think there are some riders coming out of the field to join that group. So maybe the addition of some fresh legs. I see Russell moving up into what is now 7th position. She was a new addition up there. So they're starting to add some riders in the chase. Maybe some fresh legs will help to bring this gap back, although it's back up to right around 200 meters now. So, Garrett, this is so frustrating, real life and virtual. You talked about staring at the hub in front of you, staring at the rear hub of the rider that you're trying to follow. Very similar to watching a group go away up the road. It's really tough in virtual racing mentally to be putting in this effort and then watching this screen, and the dots are just getting smaller and smaller and smaller up ahead of you.
Yeah, definitely. And there's been so many times, where you just work so hard and you're either slowly closing the gap, or else there's been times where you actually close the gap, you finally catch the group, and then you go up a little rise, and you've been on the limit for so long, and then you hit that little rise, you get popped straight out the back again. So you hopefully, if these individuals, if they catch the lead group, hopefully the lead group, doesn't go up a hill or put down a steady effort so that they can actually stay in there and not get popped once they get right back on.
Gap going up again, 240 meters now, back to this group. But look at the zone, Double Hickok in the green zone here, so I don't know that she's really driving the pace up here at the front of this group. It's going to take some other riders to take charge, because you're not going to close this gap in the green zone, Eric. Even though the riders up the road are still in the green zone, not riding too hard, the chase group is going to have to go blue or orange, somewhere in there, like maybe 40-50% of your effort just to close down that gap.
Yeah, no, right. I mean, if you're gonna close down a gap, you have to do a bigger effort than the people in front of you are doing. And so even if they're sitting in the blue and green zone, like you said, the people behind are going to have to go orange and teeter into red to get that gap closed down. One thing I missed it.
Go ahead.
I missed that maybe we didn't talk about was Elena O'Mara is not in either of these groups, is she? I don't know where we lost her, but that's a big story for us right now.
Yeah, O'Mara on the podium yesterday in 3rd place, but missing from this front group. It might have been a technical issue for O'Mara. We had a camera on her earlier, and we lost that camera, so we'll see if we can figure out what happened to Elena O'Mara back in the group. But yeah, good observation, Eric. One of the top riders in this field missing from either the front group or the chase group as Elena O'Mara comes up MIA here with 24 kilometers to go.
And interestingly, similar to how the guys' race played out, the crit winner, Tom Thrall, won both the crit and then today's race. And we look at Godby, who won last evening, and she's riding really strong right now. We haven't hit the hills yet, but we'll see if it plays out similar to how the men's race played out.
Yeah, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier with recovery and training and stuff like that. When you're good, you're good. There's also something to the confidence to be built in a few days of good racing before the World Championships this week. So Gabi maybe just looking for a little mental bump to show herself, hey, I'm still on top of it. I'm on good form. I have good fitness. And give herself that belief that she can ride with the best in the world this week.
And I just got a message here, Brad, from one of our viewers that O'Mara and Mallory, so one of them is, it's actually Frank Cundiff, is with Mallory McCrosty, and they are chasing together. They're off the back, about 800 meters back, trying to get back to this lead group. So interesting enough, still in the race, chasing on, but they missed out on a move somewhere on the road.
Yeah, just reading through some of the comments on our Facebook and YouTube pages. Andrew Walter with a good question. Any riders in the chase group that don't have a rider in the front group? Saying, obviously, you're not going to chase down a teammate up the road. Good observation. A rider like Maddie Ward, though, no riders represented in this breakaway. Chris Doble-Hickok doesn't have any rally cycling riders in this breakaway, her trade team, but she does have Jackie Godby, her national teammate, but I don't know that Doble-Hickok would really be letting off the gas here to give a win to Godby. I don't know that the national team members are really riding as a squad here in the ERL. I think Godby is pretty much riding her own race at this point, but good observation there about the teams in the chase and up to the front group.
Yeah, you don't get to this level without being just gritty and competitive. So there's no way Krista Doble-Hickok is sitting back there and saying, oh yeah, I'm going to be teammates with her on Wednesday. I'm just going to let that go. That's not part of her DNA. That's not how she got to become a professional cyclist. That just doesn't go through our minds. You want to win every single day. You go to the line and you expect big things of yourself, and you want to win. And I think it's more of a matter of how the race played out than letting somebody up the road.
All right, we've located O'Mara and McCrosty in 16th and 17th place right now. So these riders riding together in real life. They're next to each other in real life in, I think it's Elena O'Mara's garage, but they are having trouble off the back here. So trying to work together, trying to get back up there, but probably not going to happen for O'Mara and McCrosty today, as it looks like they're going to be just a little too far off the back, having lost the draft. Just goes to show you, Eric, even the best riders can struggle on these long days of racing in virtual racing here. Find yourself just letting a small gap open up. Again, it's really tough to cover that gap, and I have to think that that's what happened to Elena O'Mara and Mallory McCrosty here, because these are two incredibly talented riders. There's no doubt in my mind that they should have the legs to be up there in the front group. So I don't know if it was a technical dropout or just a lapse of attention, but two very strong riders now struggling to stay inside the top 15.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know for myself, I'm somebody that in these really long races in real life on the road, I'm able to let myself zone out a little bit, maybe talk to an old teammate or a friend in the peloton, especially in the transitional parts of the stage where maybe the brake has already went up the road. In the virtual space, I mean, if you don't look at your screen for 10, 15 seconds, a lot can happen in that very short amount of time. And you can find yourself in a position of difficulty. And so there's a very good possibility that that's what happened here.
Yeah, and even a little bit of separation back in this group. O'Mara is starting to gap off Mallory McCrosty as maybe Elena O'Mara is going to try and head out on her own here. Guys, to talk about why this is so surprising to see Elena O'Mara off the back, you got to go back and look at the body of work for O'Mara this season, currently leading the series by just 1 point ahead of Jackie Godby. So if Godby is riding that way up at the front, you would think O'Mara would be able to do it. So that's why I'm so surprised to see Elena O'Mara this far off the back. Now, Chris Doble-Hickok sitting third place overall in that second chase group on the road. And then we also see Stephanie Sidlick in there as well with Doble-Hickok in the chase group right now. Chris Tracy not racing this weekend, so fourth place overall up for grabs. She won't get any points this weekend. That means that riders like Sidlick, Chafin, Esteboville, I know, is in this group. They should be able to move up on GC if they can have solid rides over the next 3 days. So we might see some reshuffle at the top of the GC at the end of this one at the virtual tour of the Gila.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if we're getting about 10 kilometers from the base of the start of the climb, and maybe O'Mara can pull back some time. She's a collegiate runner, or was a collegiate runner, so that might suit her pretty well, doing that final climb and claw back some time. But last I looked, she was closing on almost a kilometer behind, and that's pretty far and in a pretty big ask in the final 20K here to pull that back.
That gap, though, to the second group is just sitting there at 250 meters. I don't know if they're just kind of waiting for each other and playing games, and they're sitting content and waiting to get to the big climb of the day before they really throw the hammer down, or if it's really just an equal match between that front group and that second group. And they can't get away. But if that second group is bigger, which it is, and people are taking more turns and they're conserving some energy, I wouldn't be terribly surprised if somebody could jump out of that group and get up to this first group on the climb, because this first group has got to be expending more energy.
Yeah, so there's basically three groups out there right now. The lead group, this is the third group sitting behind as we look at the battle for 12th through 14th, basically, in this group. Again, with some really strong riders. Angie Buonasesi up at the front with a little gap. See Anna Rogers there, another Canadian joining up. And you can see the numbers to the left of their names. That's the current place that they're in. So 11, 12, 13, and 14 here just behind that duo of McCrosty and O'Mara. Sidlick starting to surge a little bit. These groups are starting to break up, guys. They're realizing that when they get to the bottom of this climb, it's going to get a lot harder. So I think Garrett predicted it perfectly that at 10K from the bottom of the climb, this is where things start to heat up, because the Mongollon climb looming in the distance really starts to become real. Does that happen in real life, Garrett? I mean, can you see the climb on the road when you're driving down Highway 80? Can you see the road that you're going up off to the side?
No, not really. It's kind of, you go through this little town of Glenwood, and then it gradually you sort of going uphill, but then you take a right-hand turn, and then you can sort of see where you're going. So this one is not like you're going up a prominent, huge mountain, but once you take that right-hand turn, you're going to go uphill. And what'll be interesting to see is, as we get a little closer to that 10K mark, sort of where the climb starts, is if any of these people in this front group start sitting on, conserving a little bit of energy to save that for the climb, because I know that happens quite a bit, and that might allow some people from the second group to bridge this gap and bring it back a little bit. So we'll see if anyone starts conserving a little of energy, sitting on before we start hitting this climb.
Godby opening up another small gap, although I think this is just by, I'm not going to say by accident, but not necessarily meaning to attack here off the front. You see how quickly the colors change for Lejeune, Real, and Wiseman, as they want to make sure that they do not let Godby get away today. Don't forget, official Echelon racing gear available at wearenations.com. You can find all your favorite team gear up there. I'm still working on my personal line of merchandise. I know Eric is acting as my agent on this one, but we're trying to get some custom T-shirts up there for me. We're still working on the design process and getting some copyright rights cleared, Eric. I think that's right.
Yeah, who doesn't want a T-shirt of Brad Soner with a mic
it's just my face. It's just a giant picture of my face on the T-shirts. Those should be available this week, and I'm sure it's probably going to crash the store, to be honest. I would make sure those guys have a little extra server space on wearenations.com when that collection drops.
I mean, I think it should become the USA Cycling employee shirt, something they can wear every Friday or something like that.
I have a feeling the morale at the USA Cycling office might drop a little bit if they all had to wear shirts with my face on it. That's for sure. I think they have enough of me out there in Colorado Springs.
So, in sort of speaking of gear, Eric, if we might have some people who are not really that familiar with this e-racing, they may want to get involved with it. So, what type of gear would an individual need to get if they wanted to start this e-racing? Like, what do they need so that they can show up and do a race?
Yeah, for RGT particularly, you need two apps. One is a mobile app for your phone, and or your iPad. And then another would be your screen app, which you can put on an iPad, an Apple TV, or other smart TV device, or your PC. And so you connect those two apps, and then you would need either a smart trainer, so a trainer that gives off a Bluetooth signal that can connect to your mobile app, and that's what communicates all of the data that we see on the screen right now. Or you could even use Bluetooth or ANT Plus enabled power meter. But you need something that would give you power data. That's how these avatars are moving. That's what indicates the speed at which they move, how they move through the group, all of those things. And so you need power coming from some sort of source, which could either be a smart trainer or a power meter.
And if you could recommend for the smart trainer, what would you actually recommend for the novice rider who's trying to start? Like a good solid smart trainer that a lot of people use.
Yeah, I mean, up until this year, I was on an M2 by Saris, which is a wheel-based trainer. It worked great. It did everything that I wanted it to do, except for I wore through some tires, and it didn't quite have the stability and the big flywheel that I wanted for some of the bigger efforts that I was doing. So this year I transitioned to the Saris H3 trainer. It's got a little bit more weight to it, so it's a little more stable. It's got a bigger flywheel, so you can put out some of those bigger wattage powers. And then it's direct drive, meaning there's really no power loss between your tire and the roller that it would normally be on a wheel-based trainer. Your chain is directly connected to the trainer itself, and so there's no power loss, and there's a lot more responsiveness in the data transmission. But starting with a wheel-based trainer isn't a terrible way to go, and it's definitely feasible to train and compete with that setup.
Yeah, we should say, too, it's pretty amazing how the technology has changed in the fluidness of the trainers over the last few years. If you've been on a trainer maybe 10 years ago, you tried one of the old analog trainers, the experience on a trainer is a lot different. And there's also all these accessories that you can get now. They can link it with the fans, and you can have the wind blowing on you. A lot of riders put the trainers on what's called a rocker board that allows you to rock the bike side to side, just like in real life, if you like to stand up and get a lot of movement on the bike. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you can add on to the trainers, but it really is a new experience. Just over the last few years, as this technology has really come into its own, we've seen a rapid development over the last, I'd say, 5 years. So if you've ridden a trainer before and maybe didn't enjoy it, give it another shot. Try it with a smart trainer linked up with one of the apps, because it really is a much different experience than the old days of just trying to rewatch an old Tour de France stage while you were sitting on a trainer in your living room. The interactivity helps a lot. This is Claudia Behring off the back. Now, she was with that group of three. She was up with Beauville and Russell, but now finds herself stuck in 10th position here. So that second group starting to fall apart a little bit. Here goes Stephanie Sidlick. She's probably going to go right by her here as, again, Behring going backwards, Sidlick going forward. So tough day here for Claudia Behring as Stephanie Sidlick, the slow, steady star of the Echelon Racing League, finding herself front. It's a classic story, right? The tortoise and the hare, as Sidlick just staying calm and waiting for her time to make the big move.
Yeah, and with the holidays coming up, great gift ideas. Someone getting smart trainer, some of these accessories, and you can get your Brad Soner T-shirt, and you have all your necessities you need to compete in your racing.
Those are the stocking stuffers, the T-shirts, obviously. The trainer goes under the tree. I'm impressed how well this group has been able to stick together up here at the front, Eric. There's certainly an element of skill to being able to ride in a group like this virtually. Obviously, these riders well experienced by now, but to be able to do this for what's coming up on an hour without a mistake of getting dropped out of the group or, heaven forbid, a technical issue, pretty impressive for this lead group of 4.
Well, and I think the biggest thing is they're not able to communicate with one another. So they've just clearly come to an understanding of how they're going to work together. They're able to look at the data and say, okay, it looks like every time they pull through, we're pulling at around 4.8 watts per kilogram. So that's what I need to do when it's my turn to be on the front. We're going to take 30 to 40 second pulls, and so you get into a rhythm, and they've done that nicely, and because of that, it's working for them. That group behind has done the same. They're maintaining that gap of 250 meters. That's gone unchanged for almost 15 kilometers now. So it's just this group 1 versus group 2, and but both of those groups are working really well, and they're starting to figure it out.
Yeah, that is maybe the biggest thing missing from virtual racing and the group dynamic is the ability to communicate, Garrett. There's a lot of verbal and nonverbal communication that goes on in a real-life breakaway, but these riders don't have any of that. So I imagine you talked a lot to the riders that you were in breaks with, whether it was an elbow flick or just a little nod of the head. There's a lot that goes back and forth between the groups.
Yeah, definitely. There's, always some sort of communication, whether you're to ease up a little bit or, slow down or pull through a little bit harder, things like that. And then as you get towards the pointy end of the race, which we're starting to get to here, it tends to be getting a little more animosity between each other. Someone's not doing as much work as you would expect, etc. So, and one thing with the virtual platform is, these riders, you can't really look at each other's faces and be like, oh, that rider looks like they're hurting, right? You don't have those sort of those visual cues as well, and that makes it a little more difficult. It's easier to play a poker face in these types of virtual settings.
As always, one of my favorite parts about racing, the dynamic in the breakaways where best friends become enemies so quickly in a situation like this where they're riding together, they're taking pulls, they're sharing bottles, maybe the team car is helping different teams in the breakaway. It's all for one and one for all until we get on the climb, and then it's like they just forget about the last hour and a half of riding together. So we'll see if these riders start to attack each other up in the front group, but right now it looks like they are more than happy to just sit on here. As I said earlier, straight chillin' is the French term that they use over in Europe, Eric.
Well, I'm glad you know the European language because that's not a term I've come across yet. So I'm gonna have to do a little bit of research and catch on. But yeah, I think at this point too, these groups are thinking about the climb that's ahead. They know they still have 35 minutes or more of racing ahead of them. And they have to think about how they're going to get up and over that climb. Doing something silly now they're going to have to pay for it big time later on. So conservation, straight chillin' is the name of the game.
Green zones all around.
And it looks like the gap's even opening up a little bit. We're getting close to 400 meter gap between the first 4 and then the second group on the road. So they have a pretty sizable margin heading into this next climb, which starts in the next 3 kilometers, 3.5 kilometers around that distance.
Eric, a question on YouTube about the different zones of power that we're seeing. We saw the different levels of power up in the upper right-hand zone. They're asking about how those are calculated for each individual rider, if it's unique to the rider or if it's just triggering a wattage to change the power zone that they're in.
Yeah, so when you create your profile for your avatar in the RGT app, you have to enter what your FTP is, your functional threshold power is, and then those different zones, those color zones, are determined based on percentages of your FTP, and so those are rough estimates based on some research that was done by somebody in a lab. And then they're using those percentages of your FTP to calculate those colored zones. The app also does if I entered, let's say 250 for myself as my FTP, and then I went out and did 30 minutes at 300 watts, it does recognize when you've set a new functional threshold power, and it asks you to update that in the app as well, so you do get that most accurate data.
Yeah, and for the pros, there's also a verification process that goes on both with their weight and the devices that they're using to register that power to make sure that we're getting accurate readings from all the riders as well in these power zones. So you can trust that in the ERL, these are going to be pretty accurate because the riders do their weigh-in before the start, and then obviously they have to calibrate their power meters and trainers to make sure that it's accurate data coming in. Big part of virtual racing, an important part of virtual racing, make sure that there's no technical advantage for any riders out on the road. It's sort of trying to level the playing field, making sure that there's no variance in some of those events.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's a long, lonely ride for Stephanie Sidlick. I'm sure she's just staring at her stem right now, Chris Froome style, head down. Just, okay, I got 13 kilometers, 15 kilometers, whatever she has left to get to the end of this day here. But man, she is grinding away, and she's doing it alone, which is the hardest way to do it.
So this is the group that Stephanie Sidlick just left as she moved up into 10th, leaving behind Rogers. See if there's anyone else in here. We saw Claudia Behring earlier. And is it just 5 or any riders behind? No, it looks like just those 5. So, all right, pretty big gap back there as well from, we'll say, 15th place back to 16th. So really starting to see the groups form out there, guys. Everyone linking up with a rider out there except the solo Stephanie Sidlick.
Sometimes that's easier to do, though, too, to go out on your own. You know what you're feeling, you know what you're capable of, and it can be difficult sometimes if it's not smooth in the group to sit there and rotate through and participate in the group rotation. So if that was the case, if it wasn't smooth, if it was kind of punchy, it might have been easier for Stephanie to go off on her own, just find her zone and ride at a steady state. That might be better for her.
Krista Doble-Hickok leading the way for this group. Again, used to seeing Krista in her orange rally jersey, which is her trade team that she races with on the road, but she switched over to the national team jersey, both in real life, you see her camera there, and on her virtual rider as well, the avatar on RGT, and I think Zwift, too, also has the Team USA jersey. So a little change up mid-season for Krista Doble-Hickok.
And if you looked into the picture of her, she had a pretty nice setup. She had fan behind her, one on the side, I assume one in the front of her. So the more airflow you have, the better off you're going to be to help regulate your temperature.
Yeah, she actually has a portable air conditioner that she has in her little training area there with her. We got a little tour of her pain cave before our real road stage race. So, yeah, she is definitely committed to virtual racing here, that's for sure, with fans to spare and, yeah, even a air conditioner right next to her.
Yeah, and sort of the colder it is, almost the more ideal. And you know, ambient temperature is ideal as, you know, for the human body is probably about 50 degrees, so on the chilly side, and that's also a big benefit. So she's smart from that standpoint.
Look at this. She's got the thermostat right there. She can adjust the temperature from right on the bike. Perfect place for the pain cave. All right, back up to the lead group. with Godby, Weissman, Lejeune, and Real as they hit the 10-kilometer to go marker here, which means they're going to start climbing here pretty soon, Garrett. You see a small uptick in the elevation profile up in the top right corner of the screen, but it's going to get a lot steeper here real soon in the next couple kilometers as they approach this climb up to Mongollon. And if it's anything like what we saw in the men's race, this group's going to break apart. We talked about the plateau. There's a first section of the climb. It flattens out a little bit, and then the second section goes all the way up to the top and to the finish. And it seems like that plateau, Garrett, is where this race is won and lost. Does that happen in real life too? I mean, is there the section on this course or on this climb that every year seems to have an impact on the race?
Yeah, I think heading into it, again, this little sort of, it's a steep kicker. It's a gradual lead-in, then there's a little steep kicker before you get to that plateau. It can have some wind on that plateau, and it tends to soften up the legs a little bit, make them a little hurdy, and then once you finally hit that steep, 4-kilometer section, hopefully you were able to conserve some energy, and if not, you're out the back, and you can't really do much besides survive the last 4K from there. So definitely this lead up into the final 4 or 5 kilometers is essential to doing well at the finish.
All right, before they get to the bottom of that climb and it really starts to tick up, I want to take a couple seconds for one more history lesson here. This was another really interesting thing I found from my time talking with Dr. Bettison. We got to talking about the trophies that are awarded here at the Tour of the Gila. They have very special trophies that the riders get every year, including our virtual riders here at Tour of the Gila. Dr. Bettison told me a little more about those.
Well, the reason that they survive is that many of them are found buried as a last final function of the vessel, to be buried with the deceased. And it's not just vessels. Sometimes it's, or vessel, I mean, folks can be buried anywhere in their life with a particular vessel, mainly a black on white, which is what is captured everyone's imagination. And is what they'll get a replica of, the winners of this Tour of the Gila.
Pretty cool trophy to take home. Garrett, I'm sure you saw some cool trophies in your career. Anything stick out in your memory as a favorite award or trophy? There's animals, there's beer, I gave away a chair once as an announcer. Did you have any favorite prizes in your time as a pro?
You can't go wrong with beer. Beer is always a good prize to go, and that's why the Mimbres culture is pretty cool, right? They made their own corn beer, so maybe Tour of the Gila one day could start handing out corn beer for along with these cool trophies.
Eric, I know you worked closely with Jack Brennan, the race director at Tour of the Gila, to get you guys did another virtual Gila earlier in the year, and the winners there got the real life trophy. We saw a picture of them there in the package. Pretty cool to be able to bring that element of real life into virtual racing here. Will the winners of these races get trophies as well?
Yeah, we didn't work that out yet. I don't know if it's a possibility or not. It was definitely something extremely special that we were able to do that earlier this spring, and I think a big thing behind that was it was a symbol of hope. It was a symbol of normalism during some really difficult times in the beginning of quarantine, where there was a lot of questions being asked by a lot of people, and so it was something extremely special that we were able to do this spring. I don't know that we're going to be able to do it again for this event, but definitely a really great opportunity for those riders that competed for those trophies earlier this year.
Yeah, pretty cool members designs, handcrafted by potters Robin Parsons and her husband, Fred Pineda. They do those custom trophies every year. So just another reason to get back and race the Tour of the Gila once this pandemic is behind us and we can get back to some in real life racing. Certainly this one worth making the trip for. All right, back up to the front. Looks like Lejeune taking over in pace setting up in the front group of 4 with Real, Weissman, and Godby. A little bit of a gap here as we're getting onto the climb at 8% gradient there. So Looking at the distance to go at 7.7K. Real in a little bit of trouble off the back here. We'll see if she goes into a deeper zone to try to get back on. But the other thing you have to be careful of here is that you don't panic too early, because 7.6K, Eric, whether you're climbing or not, is a long way to go to the finish. So it might be easy to go too deep too early and then find yourself off the back. Maybe better to just try and hold on to fourth place instead of completely blowing up and finding yourself outside of the top 10.
Yeah, you've got to be smart. You've got to know your body. She still has a really nice gap on that chasing group. So if she can just find her zone and then settle in and keep pushing the pedals hard, she might be able to make it and secure a fourth place here. It looks like those three are climbing away from her, but you never know. Sometimes just that transition from the flat to the hill can be extremely difficult. And then you re-find yourself, your legs feel better, and maybe she's just having that moment and will be able to come back. But I don't know that's gonna happen as this group of three continue to ride away.
So again, picking up 3,300 feet of elevation gain on the course today, Garrett, and they've probably knocked out less than 1,000 at this point.
Yeah, and they're getting here to they're on this little steep section, and then they're going to have a little level section before getting to the final part where it's sustained over 10% grade for the last 4 kilometers or so. And it's interesting to see Wiseman here was sort of yo-yoing off the back just a little bit ago, and now she's going to the front and putting Lejeune in some difficulty.
This one is
top 3
falling apart pretty quickly up here at the front. As Wiseman in the red zone here, you see the color bar below her name. This is a long effort, but everybody responding into red, and I think Real is going to let off the gas here, just like we were talking about. You see she's not really panicking to get into that orange or a deep red zone. So, yeah, just trying to defend fourth place from Christopher Hickok behind her, who is going to be there pretty soon if things keep going the way they are. You see the distance slowly ticking away back to Christopher Hickok, so we might see a good battle for fifth place changing a little bit up there. Now, Godby is the next to attack on the way up the climb here. Boy, back and forth riding from this front group. This is really good racing, as it was 4 and now down to 3 with this group breathing down there next, trying to catch Jen Real in the gap.
And it's great to see the international flavor in the top 3 up front as well.
Lejeune with a little gap. That's like the start of a bad joke. An American, a Belgian, and a French woman find themselves in the breakaway.
How would that joke go, Brad?
I think it's an American, a Belgian, and a French rider walk into a Nimbus corn beer brewing room.
Yeah. It's I'm just thinking if they walk into a room and a fight breaks out, because that's about that's what's going to happen here in a short little bit.
Yeah, if there were any friendly terms in this group, those are very quickly being thrown out the window, especially as the attacks start. So, yeah, if these riders were able to communicate and there was any sense of friendliness, you can be sure that that's gone now, as we now see Esther Bovia, the Canadian, up on the front of, again, what is the chase group, sitting with Christopher Hickok in the battle for 5th, although I think it's going to become the battle for 4th because, Real getting back up there. She was down to like 200, 300 meters, but now getting back up to 400, 500 meters for Real. So maybe redoubling her efforts here. She might be able to hold on to 4th place today.
Yeah, I feel like out of these 3...
Sorry about that, guys.
In the front here, out of these 3 in the front here, Godby's looking pretty strong, and so is Wiseman. But I think based on results of yesterday with Godby winning the criterium, it'd be hard to bet against her.
I'm getting news as well that behind. Up? Yeah, that behind McCrosty and Amara, they're joining the 3rd group on the road. So we'll see what that means, and if they're able to limit some losses there too. But the group behind has swelled a little bit, and maybe that'll be enough to lift their effort and move them closer to the front of the race.
And we can
Matty
see
Ward
here that
just drifting off the back here, yeah.
That the leaders are on about the kilometer half flat section before the last 4 or 5K of really steep climbing.
All right, back up at the front. Pretty much all locked in here, wheel to wheel for Godby, Wiseman, and Lejeune. But still no huge efforts out of this group right now. You see all three of them in the green or blue zone. Probably at this point because they don't have anything to worry about behind them. Eric, if you're in this race and looking at these stats, are you pretty comfortable with the group behind you, the Easler Double Hickok group, coming up on almost a kilometer back now?
Yeah, no, I mean, right, Godby's looking for the overall, to win the overall for this race, and the other two are certainly going to be looking to contend for the stage. And so they've got to be happy. They just need to keep working together, get closer to that finish, and then start throwing punches at that point in time. But there's no reason for them, unless they're feeling really good or not at all confident about what they can do towards the end of this stage. There's no reason for them to attack one another. They might as well stay that group of three, work together, and keep it in a relatively comfortable zone.
Garrett, I know you've been inspired by watching the racing. I've got good news. There's an Echelon Racing League amateur league that you can jump in. I know your pro career is past you, but if you want to give racing a try, check out the Echelon Racing League Amateur Series. They're running an amateur series of all of the races that the pros will do. Top 10 riders from each amateur race get a chance to race in the pro race. So if you're thinking about getting into racing, you want to test yourself against some other riders, give the ERL Amateur Series a shot. You may find yourself in one of these pro races one day. Pretty cool opportunity to get called up the ranks. So, Garrett, it's not too late to redouble your career. Get back into it. I don't know if your UCI license is still valid, but I'm sure we can get that reactivated.
Is there a sub-amateur league that I could participate in?
That's my league.
The armchair league?
We do have categories 1 through 4, so people are able to go and select what their current fitness in watts per kilogram FTP is, and then race against riders of similar ability levels. So, we tried to make it as accessible for all people of all ability levels, and we truly, we want to build the community around virtual racing.
Yeah, I'll have to see if I can get my fat bike on the trainer. No, but it is. It's definitely interesting, and it's great just to the benefits. I think especially having 2 kids, and like I was saying yesterday to my wife, you can come down into the basement and hammer for an hour and be done, and that's a very convenient, great thing to do. So it's a great opportunity for a lot of people out there.
Double Hickok separating a little bit up here on the front. Chris Double Hickok is another good example of a rider who really learned the advantages of riding on a trainer, even as a professional. She was doing most of her training outside. For a lot of riders, it's as much as they can to ride outside. But once you start seeing the effects of training on the trainer, and you see how targeted and efficient riding on the trainer can be, because you can nail your workouts exactly what your coach is sending you. You can set these pre-programmed workouts where it adjusts the resistance on your trainer. So it's a much more targeted training when you're riding on the trainer. We're starting to see a lot more riders move to it by choice and not just by consequence because it's cold out or there's snow on the ground or whatever the issue is with riding outside. We're seeing riders instead choose to ride inside, Garrett, because they can sort of watch those numbers a little better. You can share the data with your coach, and it just allows for a more controlled training environment.
And yeah, so this is actually a good question for Eric. And when it comes to training for these type of events, what does the average athlete, esport athlete, do they spend most of the time on the trainer, or do they prefer to ride outdoors? I'd assume you have to spend a fair amount of time on the trainer, getting used to these platforms.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it depends what your preference is. For myself and for other people in my position that race in real life, they're doing a mix of both. They're getting out to maybe do their intervals or to do their long rides, and then picking and choosing workouts to do on the trainer. So I probably in the regular season when the weather's nice, I'd maybe ride the trainer once or twice a week. On some specific workout days in the winter, probably five times a week, and only get out once or twice, depending on what the weather is. So, and then there's other people that haven't left indoor riding for 6-8 months. Like, that's all they do. And esports is their discipline of choice. And so that's where they spend the majority of their time. But I don't think there's one way to do it. I think there's multiple ways to achieve the same goal.
Well, seeing some separation up in this front group. You see Lejeune getting dropped, and it sounds like Krista Doble-Hickok is also putting the pressure on her group back behind as she locks in with Esther Boville to try to get away, dropping Easler and Russell as Godby and Wiseman stick together in first and second here. Lejeune having a little bit of trouble after hanging on for as long as she could. This is just a slow, steady march up to the top for them. Look at that, 12.8% on the gradient. Now, there is one section where this maxes out at 16%, but it's for a very short time. So they're really averaging in the 7 to 8% on this climb on the way up, which for 20, 30 minutes of climbing is pretty serious, whether you're on the trainer or racing in real life. Guys, look at the separation back here. Doble-Hickok and Boville now finding some separation between themselves as they get onto one of the steepest parts of this climb at 12%, Eric, and this is where you really show your strength on a course like this, and Krista Doble-Hickok is looking great right now.
Yeah, and I mean, riders might be approaching this two different ways. We can see that that Krista is out of the saddle, pretty high cadence, just going back and forth. Some folks might be sitting in this low gear, just spinning at 100, 110 RPM, and I know Megan Easler, she's a big gear person. She likes to grind in a smaller gear or a bigger gear and a lower cadence. So either way, regardless of how you do it, it hurts. There's no way around that.
Well, and obviously riders looking for every little advantage they can get. I saw on Twitter yesterday, Krista Doble-Hickok was talking about her bun falling out in her hair. Actually, during the race yesterday, her bun up top was coming undone. So I noticed today she switched to the ponytail. Marginal gains, just one of those little things that you don't really think about, but those little interruptions can really affect your focus on the road. So you want to make sure everything's just right, Garrett. Everything's perfect so that you're comfortable on the bike, and sometimes that's choosing the right hairstyle for a day of racing.
Yeah, and that stuff, it does make a huge difference. You don't want your hair in your eyes, things like that, and everyone has their own little things. I know some people are always fiddling with their cleats and trying to get the optimal cleat adjustments. For me, it was my saddle. I always wanted the saddle to be my optimal, up-down position. So everyone has their little quirk that they're that trying to optimize their comfort.
Coming up on 2.5 kilometers to go now. And if these two riders stay together all the way to the top, it's going to be tough to make a call between one of these two in a final sprint up to the line, so we'll just wait until they get there. You can also get a good look at the scenario on the map up in the top right. You can see those little white dots. Those are the other riders on the course. So we're looking at Jen Rial right now in fourth place. So you see the front group to the right of her on the elevation graph, and then Doble-Hickok to the left of her on the graph. And you can also see Doble-Hickok behind her in the third-person view here coming up quickly. Only about 60 meters back to Jen Rial. So things keep going the way they are. Wouldn't be surprised to see Chris Doble-Hickok move up into fourth place Now we're going to see if we can find Lejeune in here, because remember, she was with this group, going to be very similar to Rial. She'll be stuck by herself somewhere between Wiseman and Rial, and I would guess eventually Lejeune and Rial will come together up here. So we'll see if they work together, if they try and link up, see if they try and get some drafting going here, although typically when you blow up in a scenario like this, there is not much left in the tank to try to redouble your effort.
And what I think is interesting is when you watch the percent grade in your stream, you can see how it bounces from 14, almost 15% down to 6%, and that's actually when they go through the switchbacks in the actual road. When you have the switchbacks, which the grade decreases, and then you start kicking back up again. So you can see the switchbacks in the road with the bouncing around between the percent slope.
Yeah, Eric, is that weird on the trainer? I mean, does it increase the resistance just for a few seconds, I would imagine? How realistic is it to riding an alpine switchback in terms of the effort that you have to put in riding around those switchbacks?
Yeah, I mean, it does. It modulates that effort, and you can certainly feel it. And there's times where you're forced to get out of the saddle just to get that extra little push. But one of the things that's interesting about switchbacks and riding in real life is typically one side of the road is steeper than the other side of the road, so you got to be able to pick a good line through the switchback, and bike handling actually plays kind of an important role in that. And so you don't have to worry about that in the virtual space. You just got to, again, keep the pedals turning, and you got to be able to get over the top of them to get back up to speed after you do that little kick and increase in percent gradient.
Speaking of a little kick, 12% now up at the front for Godby and Wiseman, as the Jaws theme music plays for Jen Rial as Krista Doble Hickok gets her in her sight. Now we'll see if Hickok is going to go right by her, or if she kind of sits on and tries to stay in a little bit. I don't think there's much opportunity to work together on the climb. Obviously, the drafting diminishes as the road goes uphill, so it looks like Doble Hickok will make the pass on Rial as she moves up into 4th place and drops Jen Rial down to 5th.
And on this climb like this in the virtual setting, you don't have the fans to give you a little push up the hill as well, so that makes it a little more difficult. And I know I relied on that quite a bit to get over some of these hills.
The physical push or the mental push?
Yeah, both.
The physical and the mental push, but more the physical push.
Or the hand-up push, I guess, too. Was that popular during your time? I mean, I know it goes way, way back, but I feel like the hand-ups have gotten more popular over the last few years. They had hand-ups at Missouri and Georgia and all that stuff. Yeah, and even when you talk about like some of these pushing physical, Brasstown Bald in Tour of Georgia, like you'd get, if you're not the top guys, you're in the middle, like you'd get pushed halfway up the hill because there are so many fans and you can't really do anything about it. So, not that we were complaining.
Yeah, that's a brutal climb. That's one that I mean, your knees feel like they're going to pop out of your legs going up that.
Yeah, and a lot of people would put smaller front chain rings on, things like that, just because it's such a steep grind and long all the way to the top. Which we're getting close to the last K here, and looks like it's going to be a battle between two people, Godby and Wiseman.
Rial, meanwhile, having a tough time back here trying to hold on to her positioning as Beauville and Sidlick make their way up now. And here we go. Wiseman starting to attack Godby. This is it, guys, on the climb at 1.1K to go. Wiseman first to hit out of this group of two. Now, Eric, just like we saw with Tom in the men's race, it is a gamble right here. You're going to win this race or you're going to blow up before you get there. But Wiseman obviously feeling confident, and we'll see if it pays off over the next kilometer. She's the first to attack out of the group of two. Now, how does Godby respond, Eric? I mean, is it do you slowly try to bring this back, or do you want to close the gap immediately as soon as possible?
Godby, I think just given the type of rider she is, given her triathlon background and her time trial abilities, I think she's going to reel it in slow and steady, which is exactly what we see her doing right now. Wiseman, while she did get a jump on Godby, she did not get quite as big of a jump as we saw in the men's race when there was an attack with 1K to go. And so now they're back together, and either Godby comes over the top or she trusts her legs for the finish, and we just have a 2-up sprint. We'll see what they decide to do.
All right, back together.
That was a nice little attack put in there by Wiseman, and we'll see if Godby can respond here.
Here goes Godby now. I love this. Just like real life racing, there's this element of back and forth, right? Of, oh, you think you're strong? Well, wait until you see this. There's some mental games that go on in these climbs. Just like when you attack someone and go over the top of them when you make the pass. So we'll see if Wiseman tries to put Godby in the box here. But this is turning into a really good battle. This is fun to watch with Godby and Wiseman here.
Yeah, and if I'm Wiseman, I'm just going to sit on Godby's wheel and
me too,
wait.
For sure.
Wait till the perfect time. I mean, she's got 400 meters, so wind it up, find your exact gear you want to be in, and then sprint like heck for 400 meters. You just got to go.
And I think the key here is just not to go too early. Especially up a hill like this, you can wait to the last 50 meters, 100 meters at most, and then you can really hit it. But we'll see what happens.
Well, Wiseman's decided to slap back in front. Yeah, I don't know about that decision. We'll see.
Now, sometimes you find yourself in this position, and it's tough to get back to the second spot because the game is keeping you at the front. You don't want to drop your wattage too far because then you risk getting gapped off the back. So maybe just looking for an opportunity to try to drop back a little bit as they go inside 200 meters to go. Wiseman's going to attack now into the red, but backs off. Godby goes again. This is it. Big attack from Godby here. This is why Godby's going to the World Championships.
Yeah, that was a jump and a half. Holy smokes, did she open up that gap. And she's going to push it all the way to the line. There's no way she's getting caught now. That was impressive.
Ow, my legs hurt watching this as Godby crushes Eleanor Wiseman on the final climb to take another win in the Echelon Racing League. Godby is in God mode this weekend, taking the crit, taking the Mongollon road race, and she's still got the Gila Monster tomorrow before the World Championships on Wednesday. This woman is on fire right now.
Yeah, that was no joke. That was 20 seconds of 9 watts per kilogram. And yeah, like Garrett just said, she made that look all too easy. She knows exactly what she's doing out on the virtual roads.
Wiseman across the line in second. This will be Lejeune limping home for third after a solid race out there today. It's tough when you're not racing for the front positions, but Cecil Lejeune did a great job out there to hang in, especially you see her in no man's land out here in third place. That can be mentally really tough to try to ride like that, Eric.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. It takes a special person to be able to maintain that focus, stay motivated. For me, I repeat little things to myself to keep myself motivated, remind myself, to keep breathing, keep pedaling, like whatever it is, whatever your little signifier is to keep on going. You gotta find that dark black hole mental space and just embrace it and keep going.
Back to Christopher Hickok, finishing up her final few hundred meters. And now you can really see the effort written on her face after a long day of riding today. She looked pretty calm for most of the day, but now Christopher Hickok is really starting to show how hard this course is on the way up to Mongollon for stage 2 of the virtual tour of the Gila. Here's Lejeune on the way in for third. And you can see 130 meters back to Double Hickok, so no threat of her being caught here, Eric.
Yeah, no, and it's just one of those finishes where you can see the finish line for so long. You just want it to be done. Every pedal stroke hurts. You're just like, come on now, get me home, pull me home. But nice job to Cecil Lejeune. Heck of a ride today. She should be super proud of that and her ability to keep pushing solo. And I would say the same to Krista. She found herself on the back foot. She believed in it, and she was able to get rid of her group and bridge across and catch some competitors on the road and finish in a nice fourth place here.
Double Hickok on the way in for fourth. Here comes Stephanie Sidlick. Looks like she's going to hold on for fifth place. I told you guys Sidlick was one to watch today. Consistent is the name of the game for Stephanie Sidlick out there. She pulls out a fifth place finish today. Great ride for the American, as it looks like Esteboville will go in sixth. She should also come across the line alone. And then some pretty big gaps to Isler and Real. So this one really blew up out there on the road. But, Garrett, this is what it looks like in real life. I mean, it's ones and twos coming across the line up in Mongollon.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of time you're just, you know, unless you're competing, you know, top 5, top 10, the rest are just trying to survive and get to tomorrow. So maybe even save the legs a little bit. It looked like maybe Lejeune was doing that towards the end, where she knew she was going to get third, so she just sort of backed off and is saving it for tomorrow. And we'll see a lot of these same players out there tomorrow, as the course is sort of, you know, similar and even a little more difficult.
I can tell you that Megan Isler is going to be, she's going to be happy with this ride. She was nervous about today. Relatively new to bike racing as well, just coming to it from a collegiate running background. So she was asking a lot of questions last night, and she should be proud of that ride for sure.
This is Russell and Real on the way in. Remember, Real was riding with that front group, went into the middle, and now gets passed by Russell just on the final few meters on the way up to the line. So tough day for Real out there, but she will hold on for a top 10 ride in ninth, and then looks like Maddie Ward is going to finish things out today for 10th. Eric, any surprises out there today? Did this pretty much go the way that you thought you would see riders on the final climb up to Mongollon?
Yeah, I was a little, you know, the one that really caught me off guard was Elena O'Mara. I think she just had a little bit of a lapse in concentration at some point in the race. Was probably, you know, positioned towards the back, got gapped a little bit, didn't realize it quick enough, and now she paid for it. But other than that, these races are always, including in real life, they really come down to 5 riders who have the ability to win a stage like this. You know, other people might have a standout day and be there to compete for it and end up top 10, but it takes a really special rider to be able to win on climbs like Mongollon.
Garrett, let's talk about what is in store for the riders tomorrow as we head to the legendary Gila Monster course. This is one that pretty much every professional bike racer in America knows well, because the road to Europe goes through Silver City, New Mexico. Take me through what they have on tap tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow is an excellent day. You know, there's lots of climbing, and basically there is not much of a flat part. You know, the start, there's some flat, but once you get past the first, you know, little bit of the course, it's basically up and down, and you have a big climb coming out of the Sapio, and then eventually you finish in Pinos Altos. So it's definitely a tough day, and toward the second half of the course, there's not really much of a flat part in the course.
And some pretty beautiful riding as well, Eric. Another day with diverse surroundings for the riders tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about tomorrow's stage. Today might have been the Queen stage with the massive Mongollon, but the Gila Monster presents some really interesting dynamics with the big climb in the middle of the stage, followed by some long descents, steep descents, and some rolling sections with a really steep sprint finish. And so I think tomorrow is probably going to be the most dynamic of the race days out of all 3 stages, and I think we're going to see some really explosive riding and some new names in the front group.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one, that's for sure. The riders that had a tough day today, they'll be looking for redemption tomorrow. If you made any mental mistakes on the way up to Mongollon today, tomorrow is your chance for redemption. So it's going to be a good one. Racing starts at 11 a.m. Eastern time for the pro men, and then the pro women will immediately follow that. So be sure to join us, watch us on all your favorite social channels. So for Garrett Peltonen and Eric Hill, my name is Brad Soner saying thanks for watching out there today. We'll see you back here at 11 a.m. Eastern for the final day of the virtual Tour of the Gila. Tomorrow's Stage 3, the Gila Monster.
Normatec recovery systems give you a high-tech compression massage for warm-up pre-workout and recovery post-workout.
The technology is very safe and is used by a broad range of athletic types and really any fitness enthusiast looking to get the most out of their workout.
The whole idea is that we're using air compression to help increase circulation in the body. We wanted to mimic physiology, the way the body moves fluids. We went ahead and took a lot of those principles and put it into a system that you can use on your different extremities and your hips as well.
Normatec has been an industry leader in pneumatic compression, providing improved mobility and profound healing for thousands of patients. We continually work with researchers to study and develop the effectiveness of our technology.
It's all about creating that community space where people have a conversation around recovery and start really challenging their beliefs in what is possible and what they've known and maybe what could be.
Welcome to Western New Mexico University. I'm Student Government President Brenda Hernandez. WNMU was founded more than 125 years ago in Silver City, New Mexico, minutes from the Gila National Forest and endless adventures. As New Mexico's only applied liberal arts and sciences university, WNMU offers over 70 areas of study covering every interest. Speaking of interest, with over 130 activities like our historic Great Race, you'll never be bored at WNMU, trust me. Visit WNMU.edu, shoot us online, and join us on our next great adventure. Go Mustangs!